The Dow and the S&P 500 still closed up for the day, and they are poised to open very solidly higher today. Okay, go ahead, Jennifer. Have at it.
Well, look, the shrinking of the economy was just all of those federal workers not able to go on vacation, go to Disney World. It's cutting into their time off, right? That Elon Musk is making them come back to the office. I kid, though. Look, the number one indicator, I think, of Trump's first 100 days in office is the fact that inflation fell to just 2.4%. And at the end of March. Look, that's the lowest the inflation number has been in 5 years. Well, guess what? That means the entire presidency of Joe Biden. So the last time inflation was this low, Donald Trump was actually president before. And that is a campaign promised and a campaign delivered on, that Donald Trump was going to get inflation back in line. Look, you also look at what Elon Musk is doing to trim the fat in Washington, D.C., to cut the budgets. Look, Trump is just getting started. And from a historical perspective, it's important to remember when Ronald Reagan first got sworn in January of 1981, it took 2 full years for Ronald Reagan to turn the Jimmy Carter economy around. And I think it's safe to say we had a worse economy than Jimmy Carter under Joe Biden. We had a post-COVID economy. We had post-COVID transportation issues, thanks to Secretary Pete Buttigieg. And, look, this is a great day at the office. If you look at Trump's first 100 days in office, they said the sky was falling. They said he was going to crash the markets. Jim Cramer of NBC and CNBC, couldn't be more wrong. He predicted a Black Monday 2 weeks ago there on Wall Street, and it didn't happen, much like Jim Cramer's most of his predictions throughout his career. So Trump's doing just fine. He's off to a great start with this strong first 100 days under his belt.
Jennifer, so you're so accurate with your discussion of the Ronald Reagan thing. Few people might, he won this historic landslide in 1984. Few people know that in 1983, he was behind in the polls to a number of Democrats who had just declared for president in 1984. But I don't know how you remember that, because you're only 27 years old, and that really is amazing that you know that history. But Jennifer, you gave me a great segue with the Jim Cramer comment. By the way, I used to work with him, not directly on his show. He's actually a really nice guy. He's just wrong so often, and, through no fault of his own. He's not a bad dude. But he's so wrong all the time. And when he says there's going to be bad things on the horizon, that's the time to be optimistic. I'm sorry, Jim. You're a good guy, but it's just true. But let's talk. He's the segue, because I want to talk about the fact that you could almost feel the disappointment in the mainstream media when the stock market closed up late yesterday. And, I could almost hear the rundowns getting ripped up in newsrooms across the country. And I did tune in to some of the mainstream media last night, and you could tell from the way that their banners were on the screen, from their tone and that they really had lost the energetic lead they thought they were going to have cheering down the U.S. economy. And I want to say one thing to the viewers. I understand. I know. Believe me, I was in financial news for many, many years. I know that the stock market isn't, quote, the economy. It's much more than that. Believe me, I get it. But it is an indicator of what investors think the economy is going to be doing in many instances. Not always, but in many instances. So, hey, look. I want everyone to understand something, and Jennifer, you're a media veteran like myself. There's bias in the news media, left-wing bias, geographic bias, but this reminds me, and I wonder if you agree with me, with what I've always said is the number one bias in most of the news media, not on this program. The number one bias is the bias in favor of gloom and doom, negativity, divisiveness, and even the left-wing news media, when Obama was president, for example, it was gloom and doom every night, even then. And this is a huge problem in America. It's important to note our problems, but if that's all you want to cover without any solutions and without any optimism, tune into this channel instead. That's all I've got to say. How about you? And listen to Jennifer's show.
That's right. Well, it's so funny. This is why you and I get along so well. We're both former TV producers, and we both worked in financial news. I briefly, I was mostly at Fox News, but I also worked at Fox Business. So we both have, some experience putting this news together behind the scenes. Look, yes, they are doom and gloom, but they weren't that doom and gloom about Joe Biden. I mean, the news media gave him, and especially the financial news, gave Joe Biden every opportunity, every advantage. If there was any doubt about something, they always erred on the side of being in favor of the Democrats, being in favor of Joe Biden, especially in terms of the markets and especially in terms of the economy. The favors they gave to Joe Biden on the economy were just pretty remarkable and pretty hard to believe. Look, there is this establishment in the financial news world, and we see it. Look, we even see it in our own Federal Reserve Chairman, Jerome Powell, right? And this is why Trump is having such heartburn over Jerome Powell. And it's because Jerome Powell is basically rooting against the country. Here's an example of that. The European Central Bank has reduced interest rates, I think 7 or 8 times. Compared to the 2 or 3 times that Jerome Powell has. Now, what does that say about the United States of America? That our Federal Reserve Bank is lagging behind the socialist European Central Bank. I mean, that is pretty bad. We are the United States of America, the birthplace of capitalism. We ought to be leading the way on this. And I like that Donald Trump is kind of pushing him, and Democrats are, just crying over this. But look, Donald Trump is going to push the envelope. He is already asking the Supreme Court to review. Here's how smart Donald Trump is. He's asking the Supreme Court to review a case from 1933 where FDR actually fired a member of the FTC that was who was a Republican. And Donald Trump has asked the Supreme Court to weigh in on that in anticipation of possibly needing to fire Jerome Powell. In that case, back in 1933 with FDR, the FTC, much like the Federal Reserve, was supposed to be an independent body, but FDR fired this guy anyway, sort of out of political retribution at the time. But he also thought that they weren't bringing them out of the Great Depression fast enough. So look, this has been done before. It's, been almost 100 years since it's been done, but keep your eye on this Trump and Jerome Powell power tussle, because that could get interesting and could go all the way to the Supreme Court if Trump chooses to fire him.
Hey, Jennifer, I only have about 30 seconds left, but I want to get your take on, the continuing problem of anti-Semitism on campus and the immigration issue, because they're related. We've had yet another student. This guy's been an undergraduate at a number of different colleges for 16 years. Mohsen Mondawi, released by a federal judge. I don't know if he'll be able to be deported right now. Look, this seems to me it's so amazing. They claim they're upholding the rule of law. It's actually not the rule of law. This person has broken the rules of the student visa program. He's clearly broken those rules. What's your take on this story? I think that luckily, though, I think these are red herrings. I think mostly the people getting deported need to get deported are getting deported. But this leaves a bad taste in my mouth, because this is just awarding, I think, enemy behavior on our soil.
Well, Jake, I haven't seen a guy who's been in college this long since I was at the University of Oklahoma party school in the Barry Switzer era and the Brian Bosworth era. I remember a Phi Delt that was still going to school after 7 years. So this guy, really takes the cake. Look, this is a scam. The pro-Palestine crowd has figured out how to scam the system. Thank God for Donald Trump and Marco Rubio, who I think very eloquently said, look, a student visa is not something to come here and be abused. It's not something you have a right to if you're not a citizen here. So I think there will be more of this cleaning of the house. But we've got to let the, activist wing of the judiciary kind of do what they've got to do. But I think, some of these cases could go all the way up to the Supreme Court. So they're going to be pretty busy for the next couple of months until they adjourn for summer.
All right. Good educational stuff from Jennifer Kelly. We've learned a couple of things from her, including the fact that she still gets carded at bars. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to give you an early happy weekend to you. Thank you so much.
You too. Thanks.
All right. Coming up, I'm going to have the latest on the massive wildfires in Israel that are already probably the worst fires in the country's history. They are indeed the result of arson by Islamist terrorists. And the Washington Post is probably the most establishment newspaper in America, and that goes right down to the way it coddles the federal workers who make up a big chunk of its readership. And wait until you see the coddling it's doing now. American Sunrise Early Edition. We'll be right back. Looks like another beautiful morning in Washington, D.C. That's a live shot of the White House in the foreground, the Washington Monument behind it in the background. Going to be another busy day. I guess this is day number 102 for the Trump presidency. By the way, I did the math. 1,461 days in a presidential term. So really only 7%, less than 7% of this presidency. Think about it that way. Welcome back to American Sunrise Early Edition. I'm Jake Novak. Special welcome to those of you on Getter and Rumble who are watching and commenting. This is a rough one. 163 firefighting teams are engaged in Israel this morning, mostly around Jerusalem, after terrorist arsonists set fires yesterday that have burned over 3,000 acres so far. The attacks seem to have been timed to disrupt Israel's Independence Day celebrations. They did disrupt them. The big ceremonies that they usually have were, they just had to be done live. They showed a taped rehearsal to the nation on TV. Very, very sad situation there. And hopefully they'll get this under control. For those of you who don't know, Israeli firefighting teams routinely fly to other parts of the world to help when there are fires and explosions. That is they were one of the best groups to do that. They often do this, even here in the United States. And I'm happy to say that firefighting teams from Ukraine and France have already volunteered to help in the situation. Speaking of the Middle East, I want you to check out this post on X from Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. Look at this. Message to Iran. This came out last night. We see your lethal support to the Houthis. We know exactly what you are doing. You know very well what the U.S. military is capable of, and you were warned. You will pay the consequence, in all caps, at the time and place of our choosing. Have a nice day. Okay, I added the have a nice day. It's always good to say have a nice day at the end. This, of course, has a lot of people considering the fact that maybe the U.S. is going to hit Iran somewhere. I think that this means the U.S. will hit the pipeline. Again, to refer to Israel, this is something Israel has done for many years. They haven't attacked Iran on Iranian soil, but Iran, which uses Iraq to transfer its weapons to Syria and has been doing so ever since the end of the Gulf War, Israel often hits that caravan. I think that might be what the United States is talking about, what Hegseth is talking about, maybe hitting as soon as they leave Iranian waters or airspace, they will hit those weapons transfers. That's what my guess is. Of course, I have no inside information, and no, I'm not on the Signal chat. Okay, who was better than the Secretary of State, as our last guest, Jennifer Kelly, sort of alluded to explain just who some of the worst illegal aliens are and where they're coming from? Marco Rubio does just that, as he echoes what the overwhelming majority of voters in every poll feel about criminals from abroad trying to live here. Listen.
I say this unapologetically. We are actively searching for other countries to take people from third countries. So we are active, not just El Salvador. We are working with other countries to say, we want to send you some of the most despicable human beings to your countries. Will you do that as a favor to us? And the further away from America, the better, so they can't come back across the border. I'm not apologetic about it. We are doing that. The president was elected to keep America safe and to get rid of a bunch of perverts and pedophiles and child rapists out of our country. Here's something else we've done. We stopped giving student visas to people who are coming here to burn down our universities and take over libraries and harass people. Why are we giving student visas to people who are coming here to create disruption? And we've taken away the student visas of people that are coming here to do that. It's simple. If you're coming to America to start riots, we're not going to give you, we're going to take away your student visa. And by the way, every country in the world that I travel, 14 countries in 14 weeks, you know what they all say to me? Yes, that's what we would do too. So the only people who seem to disagree with us are a handful of federal judges and a bunch of crazy people who get paid to write and report. So anyway, we're getting rid of that.
On a side note, I think Marco Rubio is running for president in 2028. That means he's already running. I wonder what you guys think about that. Hey, there's no law against that. Okay, look, there's entitled and then there's entitled. If you have the stomach for it, check out this piece in the Washington Post reporting on how workers at the FCC now have to report their whereabouts on work days. In other words, whether they're working from home or the office or out in the field. Now, listen, I have some sympathy for a number of the federal workers who have been dismissed. I think a lot of them who are really qualified and have done a good job will actually get rehired, but that's another story. Of course, I don't dance on their graves if they've lost a job and they've been a dedicated worker, even though we do need their jobs to be cut. I'm not saying I'm happy and smiling about their misfortune. But this is a bridge too far. You see the tone in the Washington Post if you read this story. They can't believe that these workers have to say where they're going. Now, if you call in sick in a private sector job, it's assumed you're either at the hospital, the doctor, or at home. This is something we all have to do if you work in the private sector and have had to do for well over 100 years. These federal workers are living in such a bubble, and the Washington Post covering them live in such a bubble that they think this is a terrible affront that workers have to tell a boss where they are on a workday. I've had to do that every day of my life working. I'm sure most of you have as well. This is a bridge too far, and is one of the reasons why there are some people who are celebrating at good people who are federal workers who are getting laid off. Stop doing things like this. Do better, Washington Post. Try to find out what the world is like outside of the Beltway, for goodness sakes. Okay, tax day may have passed, but for millions of Americans, the real trouble is just beginning. If you missed the April 15th deadline or still owe back taxes, the IRS is ramping up enforcement. Every day you wait only makes things worse. With over 5,000 new tax liens filed daily and tools like property seizures, bank levies, and wage garnishments, the IRS is applying pressure at levels we haven't seen in years. Increased administrative scrutiny means collections are moving fast. The good news, there is still time for Tax Network USA to help. Self-employed or a business owner, even if your books are a mess, they've got it covered. Tax Network USA specializes in cleaning up financial chaos and getting you back on track fast. Even after the deadline, it's not too late to regain control. Your consultation is completely free, and acting now could stop penalties, threatening letters, and surprise levies before they escalate. Call 1-800-905-8000 or visit tnusa.com/RAV. You may have missed April 15th, but you haven't run out of options. Let Tax Network USA help before the IRS makes the next move. Coming up, we may or may not be in an economic contraction, but people are definitely cutting back on those $40 mocha lattes. I'll have more on that story when American Sunrise Early Edition comes right back. Get your coffee. You blew it up. You maniacs. All right, I have to do that Planet of the Apes joke every once in a while when we take this amazing live shot from the torch of Lady Liberty there in New York Harbor. It looks like a beautiful day from there. Of course, if you have vertigo, this is a tough shot for you, but it's awesome for everyone else. Let's take a look at where the markets will begin today and look at these green arrows. 357 points up, I said, on the Dow. We are really getting close to about recovering 65% now of the losses that came when the tariff tantrum began. So almost all of those losses now reversed. And yesterday was a huge reversal. We were down almost 800 points on the Dow early in the trading day and ended up closing up 140 points. By the way, look at some of the other numbers here. Look at that crude oil number, $56 a barrel. That is a multi-year low, my friends. And you should really see some relief at the gas pump. Now let's look at Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is moving up as well. Yeah, at the $96,000 level now. Remember, for so many weeks, we were stuck between 80 and 88,000 on Bitcoin. Now, once again, creeping up towards 100,000. Okay, now another thing that also boosted the markets yesterday and probably helped them, in addition to people stopping their freak out over the tariffs, was the promises of a big U.S.-Indian trade deal, supposedly any minute now, to be announced. And I think that the markets are optimistic about that. Gun to their head, they believe it's going to happen. But a little bit of advice here. If this deal isn't officially announced within the next 2 or 3 days or so, there could be a reckoning in the markets about it. In fact, they might, in other words, sell off some of the buying they did if they don't see it. So if there's a deal to be made here, I think that they might want to announce this maybe before Friday or before Friday afternoon. That's just my advice. I'm sure they're trying to get it done as soon as possible, but I'm just making a little prediction here. Okay, now I want you to check out this story in the Wall Street Journal about junior bankers at a Midwestern financial firm called Baird. They are apparently, the junior bankers there are saying that they are routinely asked to work 110-hour work weeks. Now, this is the opposite of the Washington Post story, shocked that federal workers have to tell their bosses where they are on work days. Here you have another situation, which I think is the other way around. Here's what I want to know. It's one thing if you have a 110-hour work week because you've got so many deals going and there's so much money to be made and those hours are really needed. I'm calling BS on that. I think about maybe 30 or 40 of those hours, if not more, are just about hazing, high-end, white-collar hazing, just so they could do to them what their bosses did to them when they were junior bankers. And maybe it could be, you could argue with some kind of a proving ground. Whoever can make it those first few years with those hours deserves to be promoted. I don't know. But honestly, this is silly. This is actually wasting money. This is someone who's very talented, who, if you break down their hourly wages, if they're working 110-hour work weeks, it's still not worth it, even though they might have a big paper salary on paper. Hourly, it's not worth it. This kind of hazing is silly. It shows actually the smallness, the lack of toughness on the side of the owners of these places, the bosses of these places. Give me a break. 110-hour work weeks when we have computers and automation and stuff like that to do some of these analyses that these kids are doing. Give me a break. You guys are just trying to boast at how long you make your underlings work. I'm not impressed. Stop it. Just stop it. It's pathetic. Move on. Okay, it's the first day of the month, so I've made my car payment, my property tax bill, and my down payment on my Venti hot chocolate at Starbucks. Just kidding, but let's be honest. Starbucks charges a lot of money for their stuff. And for some years, when Starbucks announces its financial results for a quarter, a 3-month period, it's actually become a decent gauge of how the consumer economy is going. In other words, if consumers are willing to pay the $17,000 a week it costs to get Starbucks coffee, again, I'm exaggerating, that probably means the economy is strong. And when it's vice versa, that means, of course, the economy is not so strong. Starbucks reported weaker than expected profits, weaker than expected sales yesterday. Its stock went down, even though the market's closed higher. I think consumers are still spending, but they're probably going to Dunkin' or McDonald's or maybe actually making coffee themselves at home right now. Starbucks is a very interesting gauge at how much the consumer feels like they can spend a little extra for maybe the convenience of Starbucks, because, of course, there's one every 5 feet in America. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, start your engines. Okay, Moving America, sponsored by Artillery Tea Company, artilleryteaco.com. Use promo code America's Tea for 25% off your first order. Artillery tea is all natural, whole leaf. The tea bags are chemical free, and each tea bag can be used twice. Artillery Tea Company is family and veteran owned and operated, and a portion of your purchase goes to help veteran and first responder charities. Artilleryteaco.com, promo code America's Tea for 25% off your first order. Check it out. Hey, the new 2025 Ford Expedition started production yesterday at the Ford Louisville plant. This is the same plant that started making the Expedition in 2009. About 8,000 Louisville-based Ford workers are employed there. Over the years, that's the kind of number that they've usually had. And that's 20% of the entire Ford workforce. That's really impressive. Okay, now I like this Ford story about the Expedition news. Hey, I like it as much as the next patriotic American, but I got to go off on my media colleagues again. I know I did the Washington Post. Now it's the Detroit Free Press's turn. This is a so-called newspaper called the Detroit Free Press, you know, the one that criticizes President Trump and even Democrat politicians sometimes. I have to read the first two graphs of the story about this Expedition story for you, if you can believe this is a journalism story. Here it is, quote, Ford Motor Company, one of America's largest automakers and most recognizable brands, has a long-standing history in Kentucky. After more than a century, the newest chapter has arrived in the form of a new 2025 Ford Expedition, end quote. Again, that's the supposed news story. It's not a Ford press release. That was a news story in the Detroit Free Press. Look, again, I'm excited about the story. It is good news in my opinion. Don't get me wrong. But that's not how you write a news story. And stories like that and journalism like that is one of the reasons why we don't have honest reporting other than this program about the auto industry in this country. You should know what a good car and a bad car is. You should get reviews. You can't, because the papers are expected, I guess they are expected, to be shills like this. Do better, Detroit Free Press. You have failed. All right, let's go to the Bronx right now, where 8 men have been charged in a multi-million-dollar scheme to ship stolen luxury cars to West Africa. Look at some of these big beauties. The multi-state auto theft ring followed a 9-month investigation. It was called Operation High Rollers. Oh, I like that. In total, 72 cars worth $6.6 million, including a $475,000 Rolls Royce, were recovered in the operation. And all the cars, these stolen cars, were parked at garages in the Bronx. Here's my opinion. First of all, maybe they shouldn't arrest these guys. They found parking spaces for 72 cars in New York City. Maybe they should get a gold medal. That's impressive. And second of all, maybe that's why I can't get a parking space when I'm going to events in the Bronx or near Manhattan. Just kidding. That's an amazing, amazing arrest. And apparently all those cars were going to West Africa. So if you see a Rolls Royce in West Africa, it probably had my parking spot just a few months before. Okay, Toyota is pretty good at knowing the signs of the times. And the latest thing it's trying is a new partnership with Waymo to build self-driving cars for private car owners, not cab owners. Waymo, by the way, is owned by Google parent Alphabet. That's a cool story. Check that one out. Okay, and now for what America needs right now. What America needs is a car in the shape of a guitar that used to be owned by Elvis Presley. It's known simply as the guitar car. It's a 1970 Cadillac Eldorado. It's pink, built specifically for Elvis Presley. It's going on sale. Hey, this is a bargain. It's going on sale on eBay for $11,300. But one of the catches is the car is in France. It'll probably cost you $100,000 to get it over here. But let me make one thing very clear. I want this car. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, coming up, is there an enemy of America and anti-Semite federal judges don't love? I mean, they seem to love enemies of America and anti-Semites these days. They've now released this guy, you know, the one who's still an undergraduate after 16 years of being in college. We'll talk about that just ahead. It's Thursday, May 1st. Here are some of today's top stories. What if you threw a stock market meltdown party and nobody came? The Trump-hating doomsayers were cheering a big market sell-off when weak economic numbers came out yesterday, but then the Dow Jones turned around and finished the day up more than 100 points, and it's poised to open strong again this morning. But now for something really scary. Islamist terrorists in Israel have set massive forest fires in and around Jerusalem, wrecking the country's Independence Day celebrations. The fires are still raging, but they would have been worse if rain hadn't started miraculously falling at one point last evening. Felt like divine intervention, folks. Another day, another federal judge undermining the rule of law in favor of an egregious, detained enemy of the peace. That 35-year-old Columbia student who has been taking undergraduate classes for 16 years in this country has been freed by a federal judge, despite the fact that he, we have it on tape, harassed other students and led disruptive anti-Israel and anti-American protests. Thanks a lot, Your Honor. And this Michigan congressman calling for impeaching President Trump has quite the sordid history. How do these people get elected anyway? You're going to hear what this guy is all about. American Sunrise Early Edition continues now. Welcome back to American Sunrise Early Edition. I'm Jake Novak. It is Thursday. Special welcome to all of you who are already up and commenting on this program on Getter and Rumble. As I always say, watching the news in America now is no longer a passive exercise, and that's a good thing. You comment, I read. When I get a chance, I comment back. That's how it should be. We're having a discussion. Speaking of people having a discussion with, who really good people to do so, is Dr. Isaiah Hankel. He's joining me now, and we're going to talk about a bunch of things. He is the CEO of Overqualified.com, by the way. Dr. Hankel, let's talk about this latest federal court outrage and an attack on American decency and law. A judge has released Moshe Modawi. That's the guy who's been an undergraduate at Columbia and other schools for 16 years. Of course, he's not a real student. Of course, he is an enemy operative here to disrupt our peace, here to disrupt the civil rights of students who are just trying to get an education. By the way, his family is filled with terrorists, many of whom have died in suicide attacks. This is a real gem of a person. The judge decided to release him, saying he's too far along in his citizenship process to keep in detention. There's probably a bunch of other things he can be nailed for now, so I'm not betting on him staying free for much longer. But Dr. Hankel, I mean, give me a break. This judge is clearly just doing this because they hate Trump. They aren't doing this to protect the law because, frankly, I think they're attacking the law with these kinds of decisions.
They hate Americans, too. Excuse me. Letting people out like this is somebody who is clearly a criminal tied to criminal behavior. 34, 35 years old, right? Do you want this person around your son or daughter that's out of college as an undergraduate? Absolutely not. So I'm glad that this is making the news because it's going to help people understand what these universities do, right? These universities take in these students that get on foreign visas. They have uncapped visas. They're allowed to bring in as many as they want. These people, for the vast majority of them, hate America. And then in the university, of course, they're taught to hate America even more by many of them that become professors at these universities. Right. And then they stir up protest. They have these ties, like you said, that are nefarious at the best. And they, in this case, encourage violent protests, anti-Semitic protests. And people are scratching their head, wondering why we're letting this, why we're letting this person go. But why are the other people scratching their head, wondering why we locked him up? It's obvious. This person needs to leave the country, be kicked out. It doesn't matter if they're a full U.S. citizen. I understand that they might need due process if they're a full U.S. citizen at that point. But in this case, this should have been stopped years ago. Why are we not infiltrating the universities, finding these people before their 10th undergrad year and kicking them out of the country?
Yeah, it's crazy. All right, Dr. Engel, I want to talk about this gentleman here. His name is Congressman Sri Thanadar. He is from Michigan, and he's the guy, for those of you who may not remember, who has filed several impeachment articles against President Trump. Now, I know that your knowledge of him has nothing to do with his Congress, his tenure in Congress. It's his tenure as a scientific researcher. He had some kind of a scientific research lab that was testing on dogs and other animals, and there were all kinds of ethics violations there. Tell me a little bit more about this guy, because if you're President Trump, you couldn't choose a better enemy than this person, I don't think.
This is another example. This person got their initial degrees from the University of Mumbai. They come here through the university system. In this case, he gets his PhD, right, because of another, right, uncapped visa system. This especially happens in places like Michigan, the Ivy Leagues, Minnesota. And this is their pathway. They have an entire gateway from bringing people in that are not citizens from overseas, putting them into these institutions, giving them degrees here, and there's a pipeline to, right now, corporate America or to these Congress level seats. And that path is made clear for them, but no longer for the natural American-born citizen. That's a big part of what we do at overqualified.com is help people that can't get jobs anymore, can't get into Congress, but this person can, who clearly hates America, and again, should have been stopped years ago when they were getting their PhD and should have been booted out of the country. The fact that this person can get on TV with all of the opportunity that they had here and talk about how much they don't like America, pro-America, America First policies, and then file articles of impeachment when they weren't even born in the country and were given a chance here is really, really, that's the part that upsets me the most. But you're right. He was also a kind of researcher. He left 150 or so animals to die, just to starve to death, suffocate, whatever their fate was, because his business startup didn't work out and went bankrupt. And I think there are some cultural differences like that happen. And this is why I think it needs to be studied. If these people are getting on uncapped visas, we need to be watching where their money's going, where the money's coming from, right? So are they being supported by nefarious groups overseas? Are they only sending their money that they earn here, not back into the American system, but they're only sending the money they earn back overseas as well? And then when they get into these roles of power, why are they getting the opportunities that other American citizens aren't getting? And what's the outcome? The outcome here, and we're going to see this more and more if we don't stop it, is that they want to take down American values, and in this case, take down American presidents.
Yeah, just amazing. And by the way, I mean, people see that video of him and they think it's an SNL sketch. They think it's Jimmy Fallon.
I thought it was.
By the way, he's over 70 years old. His English isn't all that great. Again, I'm not denigrating people who come to this country and don't have perfect English. I'm sure I'll never be able to speak Hindi properly, so I'm not making fun of him for that. But he is a U.S. congressman. You would expect him to have a more command of the English language. This is just a scary, scary story. All right, Dr. Hankel, also, let's get back to the universities. Harvard did release, and I give them credit for this, they did release their full report on the anti-Semitism on campus. But that's as far as I go with giving them credit, because if you go through this report, man, it's some ugly stuff in there. It felt like maybe they think that just releasing the report will get them off the hook. I don't think you're going to agree to that, do you?
No, look, I am having a hard time giving them any credit, and I'll tell you why. They released this along with this anti-Muslim report, which of course, right, was cooked up to show that, oh, Muslims actually have it harder than Jewish people on campus. They did this on purpose, and they only did it because they've been receiving so much pressure. So the lesson here is keep the pressure on Harvard. They're not sorry about the anti-Semitism. The vast majority of their faculty, right, will teach that the Jewish people are wrong. They're against Israel. You can look at video after video after video of students trying to learn in these classes and being disrupted by these violent protesters. Some of them we've already talked about on these Ivy League campuses. So no, this report does nothing. It was some surveys, and I'm glad that they put something out there to express what the Jewish students went through, but they did it very purposefully. They did it only because of the pressure. They did it side by side with this anti-Muslim report. They know what they're doing. They're not sorry at all. They had their hand forced a millimeter. Okay, and we need to force their hand all the way and shut this down totally.
Yeah, I want to make everyone in this audience smarter for just a second. This is a very smart audience. I'm going to make them even smarter in right now. The term anti-Semitism, there's a lot of cheeky people who say, well, Semites means Arabs too. So they should always have a report about violence or things against Jews and Arabs or Muslims as well. Folks, this is how rough it is. This is how hard it is for the Jews to get a break. The actual term anti-Semitism is actually anti-Semitic. It was created by Europeans who didn't want to say anti-Jew back in the 19th century because that's really what they were. They just didn't like Jews, and they wanted to refer to Jews as people who belonged back in the Middle East, along with the Arabs. So they created this term anti-Semitism when they really meant being against Jews. So that it never meant literally being also anti-Arab. So when people use that term and they say, hey, how come you're only talking about the Jews? That's because the term itself was meant to cloud reality. I know you can't get a break when even the word describing hatred against you is actually a hateful term. That's how bad things are sometimes. But hey, we do have Jerry Seinfeld and really good bagels. Dr. Isaiah Henkel, I want to thank you for joining us. You are the CEO of overqualified.com. I really appreciate you coming to join me this morning.
Thank you, Jake.
All right, coming up. Just when you thought Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg had lost as much of his humanity as possible, he loses even more. And he's looking to export that loss to the rest of us. David Brody and I will explain in a story reminiscent of the haunting film you see here, that movie Her with Joaquin Phoenix. When American Sunrise Early Edition, we're going to talk about this. We'll be right back. Taking another look at the White House, live look here. We looked at it before. It still looks nice. Still looks like a nice day in Washington, D.C. And there's another press conference at 8:30 that you will be able to see here live on Real America's Voice, the American Sunrise big show that comes off after I warm things up for that amazing broadcast. That's going to be good. Hey, welcome back. It's American Sunrise Early Edition for another few minutes. I'm Jake Novak. Thank you so much for joining us on Getter and Rumble and commenting. Hey, listen, it may sound like a movie, but we recently learned that Facebook is looking to create AI-generated, personalized friends for people to interact with. Mark Zuckerberg explains the move in pure supply and demand terms in his haunting soundbite from a recent podcast appearance he made. Watch.
There's a lot of questions that people ask of stuff like, okay, is this going to replace kind of in-person connections or real-life connections? And my default is that the answer to that is probably no. I think I think that there are all these things that are better about kind of physical connections when you can have them, but the reality is that people just don't have the connection and they feel more alone a lot of the time than they would like. So I think that a lot of these things that today there might be a little bit of a stigma around, I would guess that over time, we will find the vocabulary as a society to be able to articulate why that is valuable and why the people who are doing these things are like, why they are rational for doing it and how it is adding value for their lives. But also I think that the field is very early. So I mean, it's like I think, there are a handful of companies and stuff who are doing virtual therapist and, there's like virtual girlfriend type stuff, but it's very early.
All right, David Brody joins me now. David, I get a real Tower of Babel. Yeah, I get a real Tower of Babel vibes from this plan. And I also have to say, it seems to me that this proves my long-standing theory that a number of the big tech titans, people like Zuckerberg, have always devalued real humanity in the first place. What do you think about this? Because this gives me bad vibes.
Yeah, well, listen, this might sound like a joke when I say it, but I'm not joking. I mean, they've talked, in terms of humanity, they're ready to go to Mars, right? I mean, literally. So, like, that's their fail-safe plan, I guess. If humanity ends here on Earth, then, I'll tell you what, we got another backup plan, and that's called Mars. I mean, they've talked about it. I mean, look, there's so much to unpack here. First of all, Elon Musk believes in transhumanism. So why don't we just start there? That seems to be a problem when you wait for it. Live forever, which this just in, Elon Musk, you can't live forever because the God of the Bible says that will not happen. You will die. And so this idea that you're trying to, in essence, play God, I think is even more dangerous than, in a way, kind of the end of humanity, quite frankly. I mean, if you think about it. Look, but Zuckerberg and Musk, and this is what they do, obviously I got all sorts of issues with it. When you say Tower of Babel, to explore that a little bit with me, what are you meaning exactly on that?
Well, the idea that they can create something that can replace the natural order of things. Obviously the Tower of Babel has a lot of allegorical aspects to it. But the idea that they were basically trying to build a tower to reach to the heavens and didn't need the connection with God, or didn't need to, most importantly, be humbled as humanity. We can do amazing things as humanity, but only if we realize we won't be able to get everything we want, like you referenced. We won't be able to live forever. We won't be able to conquer everything. Then once you get that out of the way and you realize we won't be able to do that. But I think there's something else going on here. People like Mark Zuckerberg and people who are in that tech world, let's face it, some of the stereotypes are true. They're not so good with socialization. They're not so good with girlfriends. They're not so good with social life and things like that. And so they've been turning to machines and robots and things like that for years to replace that. And that is really dangerous because I don't think that they really understand humanity, let alone care for it. When they do things like propose universal basic income, it's not because they're trying to help poor people. It's because they don't think you have their abilities. And they're just trying to stop you from storming the gate. They look at every person who isn't a billionaire as someone who might steal from them. So give them a virtual friend. Give them a handout. Build a wall around them. Keep them away from me, and I'll go to Mars. That's what I think's going on.
No, I totally get what you're saying. So here's the thing. I mean, if you type in and watch Elon Musk and Joe Rogan in a podcast he did, and type in empathy, Western civilization, and you'll hear Elon Musk specifically talk about how the biggest threat or the biggest problem with Western civilization is empathy. And as he unpacks that, what he's really referring to is this idea that, empathy is used as a kind of a crutch to get more things passed, whether it be legislation otherwise, or societies, kind of build on that empathetic nature of people and use it for bad in the world, which to a degree makes sense. But the whole clip taken in its entirety, if you think about it, if you're saying that empathy is a problem in Western civilization, that kind of gets to what you're talking about, which is this idea that, the human interaction is something not valued by them.
Hey, listen, we do heavy topics on this program sometimes, along with all the jokes and the breaking news. See you next.
American Sunrise is a great way to start your morning. Join us Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern Time. We've got the news of the day and some compelling interviews that you don't want to miss. Here's what you missed from yesterday. 99 problems, but being president ain't one. That's definitely the moniker, if you will, for President Trump today. It is his 99th day in office, but he's going to celebrate like it's 100 today. He'll be rallying in Michigan.
This is a different President Trump.
He's having fun this time. There's no doubt about that. You can see it just in the way he moves and the way he responds and really his confidence level.
He will recap some of the biggest accomplishments that this president really put out on the campaign trail. Closing the border, kind of making sure we bring manufacturing back to the U.S., hence the tariff plan. Today will be a big recap of that in Michigan, a very key state that you and I both know he had to win in order to sit in the House behind me.
I mean, what we've seen has been great. It's been a great start. But the biggest battle we face right now is the battle of communication, the battle counteracting the mainstream media and their lies against President Trump and their lies against what this administration is doing and their lies against what the illegal aliens that are being removed from this country, rightfully so. All of that, and I wouldn't even say that's a surprise, but that's the biggest takeaway from me is this battle we are in. We are in a civil war right now as we speak.
I love the fact that he is rebuilding our coal, our oil and gas. I mean, how long do you want me to go on? I could go on for 15 minutes talking about the things that he's done that are really positive. And if he can get these trade deals done, I think you're going to see that stock market really take off.
If I was a betting man, I would say there's a good chance that Donald Trump today, during this conversation at about 6:15, will say, we've worked out a deal. And I'm not really taking much of a walk on the limb here. Howard Lutnick says we have a deal on tariffs for auto manufacturing. So I think we're going to hear that today in Michigan.
Success of Doge. His tariffs are bringing jobs back to America as well. He has secured America's borders and deported violent and deadly criminals. This is like a lullaby. I mean, this is like the most comforting words you can think of. These are things we could only have dreamed of, really, even a year ago. And all of his executive orders, of course, are fantastic as well. David, what do you think the next 100 days holds, though? Because that might be the real kicker there.
I'm just trying to get through the next 24 hours, Gina, quite frankly.
No, I think President Trump has really laid the groundwork for what the next 3.5 years is going to look like. And so now it's time to just continue the work that's being done, Emily.
Implementing all of these policies that are making America great again, and we are just getting started, you guys.
Just ahead on American Sunrise. On this National Day of Prayer, we are standing by for White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt and Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller to give a joint briefing on restoring common sense. We will have the complete coverage, and we will take you there live. Plus, more and more progress is being made in getting the budget reconciliation package done. And finally, Ukraine has agreed to a minerals deal with the U.S. What exactly will this mean for the end of the war? Will it mean the end of the war? We have those stories, so much more as American Sunrise starts right now.
Good morning, America.
Welcome to American Sunrise.
Whether it's culture,
We have breaking news to share with you.
politics,
President Trump is joining us live now from Florida.
we've got you covered.
This is what it looks like to be a patriot.
We have to protect the American family.
The American dream is still alive.
I'm David Brody.
I'm Terrance.
And I'm Dr. Gina. Good morning. I am Dr. Gina. We are live with you from, well, actually, I'm in Tampa, but I'm sure there are a lot of people in Palm Beach. I know we have a whole control room going on there. Let's bring in Dave Brody. He's in Washington, D.C., and teammates in our Denver newsroom. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, David. Good morning.
Good morning to both of you.
Hey, David, I know you were downtown Washington, D.C. yesterday, not for the reason I'm getting ready to bring up, but still, I know you had a long night. Also turned out to be a bit of a later night than usual in the U.S. Senate. Vice President J.D. Vance, in fact, had to go to Capitol Hill to cast the tie-breaking vote to block a resolution basically that was trying to overturn President Trump's tariff policies. The Democrats failed. Yet, David, you mentioned this yesterday as we were talking. You were kind of watching this to see how all of this happened and how it would ultimately turn out. While the resolution itself failed, was a message sent in your mind, David?
Well, first of all, let me just clear up something at the top. You said I had a long night in D.C. I just want to be clear. I wasn't clubbing or anything. I wasn't. I just want.
Bad. My bad.
Yeah. Okay. Real quick. Yeah, I was at a Capitals game. No, that's fine. But who knows? You never know where I will show up at 1 a.m. in the deep state. No, I wasn't doing anything nefarious. Okay. So was it a message? Well, here's the thing. The truth of the matter is, it actually would have passed if Mitch McConnell had shown up. He didn't show up. Sheldon Whitehouse as well, the Democrat, didn't show up. So it was 49-49. But if those two had shown up, it would have been 51-49. And this thing would have passed and would have been a rebuke for President Trump and his tariff plan. So was it a message sent? Bottom line is it becomes a wash because they didn't show up, and that's the way it rolled. So anyhow, Gina, that's what I've got, but I'm glad I cleared up my personal life here on National.
And my bad. I was trying to make a transition that apparently failed, Dr. Gina, after I started thinking about it. Your thoughts on that vote last night in the U.S. Senate and what it means big picture, if anything at all, if it was just a political stunt?
I agree with David that it's a wash. I mean, of course, a stunt. But I just really can't get over the fact that David was out clubbing till 1 a.m. and you're transitioning. It's.
And here we go. We're going that way. All right. I got y'all.
That's going to be our story, and we're going to stick to it, David. Hey, guys, look, the country is celebrating National Prayer Day today. It's obviously a big day. This particular day was set in stone by Congress in 1952. They designated one day a year when people are asked to turn to God in prayer and in meditation. That's the quote. The president also required by law to sign a proclamation each year encouraging all Americans to pray on this day. So, Dr. Gina, before you get to your Bible verse, and David, I'm putting you on the spot again, would you mind giving us a brief prayer? We typically pray before the show. We didn't do that today. So would you do that live for us briefly? And then, Dr. Gina, would you give us our Bible verse?
Absolutely. I would love to. Lord, we just thank you so much for this day, for this show, for this audience, bringing us all together for such a time as this. And we just thank you, Lord, that you're in control of all events, even though when it doesn't seem in control, we know you are. We pray this all in Jesus' name. Amen.
Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thanks,
David. Yeah, we do that every morning right before the show. Sometimes we forget, though, as Terrance pointed out. And look, we just made up for it right here. Let's get to today's Bible verse. It's from Luke 12:25 through 26. And it says, "And which of you, by worrying, can add 1 cubit to his stature? If you then are not able to do the least, why are you anxious for the rest?" In other words, God's got you. You are not capable. He is capable. I love that one. All right. Well, of course, I love them all. Anyway, House committees have begun the markup process for the budget reconciliation package. The House Armed Services, Homeland Security, and Education committees each held markups on their parts of the reconciliation recommendations. This is the main piece of getting President Trump's agenda passed. And for more, we want to bring in Rav Chief White House correspondent Brian Glenn. Brian, these are some cool things happening. It feels productive. But what does it really shake out to? What will it mean to the average American?
It does seem productive. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for that prayer, David. That is something I think is important for our viewers to know that we do right before we actually go on air, which, by the way, Carolyn Levitt and her team, they do it before they step out in the briefing room, which they'll do here in about 25 minutes. What does it mean? Well, it does. There is some funding there, obviously, for the border and defense, things that we would want there. And there are some Republicans that are calling for additional cuts. Mike Turner, former Intel chairman, Republican, anti-Trumper, was a no, one of the two no's on the oversight committee, but they did sneak away a vote, a successful vote approving that. I think overall, when you look at what this can eventually happen in July, thinking, I know that the Speaker Johnson says hopefully we'll have all this thing wrapped up. What does it look like in the Senate? Because when you look at some of the hard no's on some of these issues, it's going to take a little bit of persuasion to get some of these Republican senators to vote and approve on this. But I do think at the end of the day, a little arm twisting, it'll happen. But it should be a much larger margin on across the board on everything. This is President Trump's agenda. This is what he wants effectively to happen, so we can put all these different policies in place. But I would say yesterday was a success. I'm not going to diminish that. I just wish we would have every Republican supporting this, but that's never going to happen. That's happy world.
Brian, when you said a little arm twisting, my mind immediately went to this U.S.-Ukraine precious minerals deal. And I only say that because yesterday, Scott Bessent, during President Trump's meeting with the cabinet, said that Ukraine came back and had some changes to the deal that was expected to be signed. Ultimately, the deal was signed. It is in effect this morning. Can you tell us what changes Ukraine came to? The administration really has seemed to be kind of tight-lipped about that. And beyond that, roll out what this agreement really means. What does the United States get? What does Ukraine get?
I don't know of any of the latest changes on that, and perhaps that will we'll find out later today in a press conference on that. But it does involve the U.S. And so, in terms of putting talent on the ground there, now that can be defined as for many different things. Could be militarily, it could be professionally, as far as transporting this rare earth minerals out of Ukraine. But it does put a presence and an interest in Ukraine, potentially long term. Now, I got to say, I'm not the biggest fan of this. I kind of want to cut bait and have nothing to do with that country. But I think this agreement does keep us in that region. And I'm looking ahead that, let's just say, if we were to lose the White House and Democrats would take over, now we have a presence there where they could potentially re-engage in some type of military backing of Ukraine. And next thing you know, our troops are on the border of Russia. That is me hypothetically going way far in advance. But what this minerals deal does, it does return revenue back to the U.S. Some can say we spent $132 billion. Some say we spent $200 billion. I think there's a lot of factors that aren't negotiated into that total number. How much CIA, how much manpower has been spent on this whole entire deal. So when you factor in the actual investment that the U.S. have, it's actually quite large. So this is a way to recoup some of that. It's a smart business plan. But I'm thinking ahead, do I really want U.S. interest on the ground in Ukraine 8 years from now? That's to be decided, I guess.
Brian, I think you make a great point. I mean, it's a good financial deal for the United States, but what about the long-term cost potentially? We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see for sure. All right, so let's move on to the GDP numbers. President Trump is blaming Joe Biden for those first quarter GDP numbers that were not good. They came out yesterday. Let's take a look at him at the cabinet meeting yesterday. Have a look.
Core GDP, and this is, you probably saw some numbers today. And I have to start off by saying that's Biden. That's not Trump, because we came in on January, this is the quarterly numbers, and we came in and I was very against everything that Biden was doing in terms of the economy, destroying our country.
I mean, look, it's a great point. January 20th is when he started. It's been 3 months on Trump's watch, but the thing is that you got to get the wheels in motion. I mean, let's talk quarter two, especially quarter four. I think quarter four will be the one to really watch.
I agree. But David, you and I both know we live in this hypersensitive, time-warped reality where everyone thinks tomorrow everything is going to be reversed. That's an excellent point you brought up, and that's an excellent point that President Trump brought up. Let's look at Q3, Q4. Let's look at a year from now. We look back and see what the numbers look like. He inherited a disaster on every level of policy, from the border to the economics to foreign policy. It's going to take some time. People want results instantly, and he's going to be criticized for not turning it around quick enough. Let's be patient and let the policies do what they do.
Yeah, boy, Brian, I'm not going to be able to stop thinking about that ominous Ukraine picture you painted, but I think it's an important thing to look ahead.
Yeah, it is. It is. It really is. Because look, you're putting American interest there.
Yeah, exactly. We're out of time, Brian. I'm so sorry. Anyway, coming up, we check out the hottest headlines from the RAV newsroom with T. Bates, and we are awaiting a press briefing with Caroline Levitt and Stephen Miller on restoring common sense. Isn't that such a great word? We're going to take you to the White House live for complete coverage, and that is just ahead right here on American Sunrise.
This news break is brought to you by AMAC, Association of Mature American Citizens.
The White House here on a Thursday. Caroline Levitt, the White House press secretary, about to hold a press conference with Stephen Miller, Deputy Chief of Staff, to talk about common sense. That is the theme on this 100 Days week. So we've gone, just to be clear, from nonsensical with Biden to common sense. That's called change. All right. First, though, T. Bates standing by with the latest headlines from the Real America's Voice newsroom. It's all sponsored by AMAC.
The Association of Mature American Citizens is the conservative voice for Americans 50 and older. AMAC is fighting for the values that you hold dear. Join today. Together, we can write the course of America.
The United States Ukraine Reinvestment Fund is signed, sealed, and delivered this morning after months of negotiating and an Oval Office spat that derailed the initially planned signing of that deal. Under the agreement, the U.S. now has access to Ukraine's valuable rare earth minerals, and in return, Ukraine has assurances about continued U.S. support in its war with Russia. In a statement, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent writes, and I'm quoting here, "This agreement signals clearly to Russia that the Trump administration is committed to a peace process centered on a free, sovereign, and prosperous Ukraine over the long term." Among Ukraine's more than 20 strategic raw materials, the U.S. now has access to its titanium, which is used for making aircraft wings, uranium, which is used for nuclear power, medical equipment, and weapons, as well as graphite and magnesium, which are used in electric vehicle batteries. Senate Republicans backed President Trump and barely vote down a resolution that would have blocked the president's global tariffs. The 49-49 vote failed thanks to Vice President J.D. Vance's tie-breaking vote and because two senators who appeared to support the idea were absent for the vote. Plus, three Republicans, Rand Paul of Kentucky, Susan Collins of Maine, and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, joined all Democrats in supporting the measure. The resolution was designed to end the national emergency under which President Trump is implementing his global tariffs. Despite the Trump tariffs being on a 90-day hold while the administration and its trade partners negotiate deals, many senators are either signed off on the on either side, of the political aisle, are still unconvinced about the president's tariff policies. Former Senator and current Vice President J.D. Vance again visited with Senate Republicans earlier this week to try and assure them that the administration is making progress towards deals with various individual countries. The Federal Reserve could soon be under the Doge microscope for potential government waste. Bloomberg News is reporting that Elon Musk is considering a probe of the central bank, citing a costly renovation at the Fed's Washington, D.C. headquarters. In the meantime, Musk joined President Trump and his cabinet on Wednesday. As the administration moves into the next 100 days, Musk is just weeks from ending his term as the head of Doge.
You're invited to stay as long as you want. At some point, I guess he wants to get back home to his cars and his. You've done an incredible job. $150 billion. Think of that.
Yeah. 160 now.
160. They said, "Oh, it could have been more." And a lot of stuff is being worked on. That number could be doubled and even tripled. A lot of things are being worked on that we don't count yet because it's not quite there.
As for the Fed, specifically its chairman, Jerome Powell, both have come under fire from President Trump recently over being slow to lower interest rates. That's a quick check of your headlines. I'll, of course, have more headlines coming your way. Plus, we're going to take you to the White House for this week's latest press briefing. Stephen Miller is going to join Caroline Leavitt to discuss restoring common sense. We'll bring it to you live. It's set to happen here in short order again. Stick around about 15 or 20 minutes and we'll take you there. Next, though, New Yorkers are sounding off about a new voting system that's being proposed there in the Big Apple. How is it going to play out? We'll have the details. Right now, though, a quick look at this day in history. It was on this date in 1931 that the Empire State Building opened. The building took just 410 days to be built, and it stands more than 1,200 feet tall. It opened during the Great Depression, and it took approximately 3,400 workers to build it. It was the tallest building in the world for 40 years. More American Sunrise coming your way right after this break.
Be a part of it, New York, New York. These vagabond shoes are longing to stray right through the very heart of it, New
campaign.
That is the White House, or if you're Joe Biden, you think it's a house around some bushes. You're not quite sure what it is. Welcome back, everybody, to American Sunrise. And good morning to everybody in the chat. Look, if you've ever looked around and thought this isn't the country I grew up in, well, look, you're not alone. Millions of Americans over 50 are waking up, just like you, and saying it's time to take our country back. We are in this together, folks. President Trump back in the White House, standing strong on fair trade, fighting waste in Washington, and boldly bringing our Christian heritage back into the spotlight. But here's the truth. He can't do it without we the people. That's us. And that's where AMAC comes in. It's the conservative organization for Americans 50 and older who still believe in faith, family, and freedom. Sorry, AOC. And for just $16 a year, you're going to receive, or you can receive, the AMAC magazine, access to exclusive money-saving discounts, and most importantly, you'll become a part of the community that's fighting to restore this nation. So here's what you do. You go to amac.us/sunrise. Once again, that's amac.us/sunrise, and join the movement. It's a new day for America. Let's rise and shine together. All right, now over to New York City, where a staggering 1 in 5 voters are reportedly registered as unaffiliated. The New York Campaign Finance Board says more than 1 million people are registered to vote, but not as either a Republican or Democrat. And half of that 1 million figure are under the age of 40. So all of this means they cannot participate in primary elections. The numbers show they turn out less than affiliated voters. New York officials are recommending that those voters join this thing called the Electronic Registration Information Center in New York, or some are calling it ERIC in New York. They want you to join ERIC, which sounds a little weird, but anyhow, that's a separate issue. To break all of this down, let's bring in the Senior Vice President of AMAC, Charles Stucklin. Charles, great to have you with us. So let's talk about this a little bit, this ERIC system. Apparently there's some controversy behind it, and AMAC's involved. Tell us more. Good morning.
Good morning. Nice to see you. So yeah, as you said, ERIC stands for the Electronic Registration Information Center, and it was launched in about 2012 by some well-known Democrat operatives, I guess you could say, who later actually launched the Center for Election Innovation and Research, well-known Zuckerbucks organization, received millions in prior elections. So they're really an organization that's received grants. They've influenced elections across the country. So from the start, ERIC's roots are deeply political. Now, the pitch sounds fine on paper. States sharing DMV data to clear up voter rolls. But the reality, ERIC is failing at its core mission and doing damage in the process. So here's how it works. ERIC takes data from state departments of motor vehicles. They search for what they call eligible but unregistered voters, and encourages states to send out registration mailers paid for with your tax dollars. But what they don't tell you is ERIC, by its own documentation, does not require or verify citizen status in the DMV data it collects. So think about that. ERIC is literally flagging people with no way to verify if they're even citizens and prompting states to add them to voting rolls. So this isn't theory. This has already happened. In fact, in multiple states, it's been reported that non-citizens have received voter registration mailers just because they had a driver's license. And a recent federal lawsuit in Wisconsin revealed that the Department of Transportation turned over confidential DMV records, which were then used to target voters with outreach efforts. So it raises serious questions about how data was assessed, how it's used, how it's accessed, and whether citizens even consented. And it just gets worse. In the discovery from that case, we learned that in states where they do not use ERIC, they're actually doing more to audit and clean up voter rolls than those that are using the program. So let me just repeat that. So in non-ERIC states that claims to clean up voter rolls, they're outperforming when it comes to removing ineligible voters. So if the system doesn't verify citizenship, it misuses private data, and it performs worse than states that opt out, I mean, why is New York even considering it?
So the system is inherently flawed, which of course leads to the question, what can AMAC members in New York and some of the other states that are using this ERIC program do to push back to try to do away with this system?
So AMAC Action has taken the lead in promoting calls to action that would essentially, what AMAC Action does here is we engage. We don't just sit and, we don't just sit back and watch. So we act fast. So through AMAC Action, our members in New York were alerted immediately when legislation to join ERIC was introduced in Albany. And within days, our members sent over 16,000 messages to just 35 members of the Ways and Means Committee. That's nearly 480 messages per legislator, all demanding that they strip ERIC, the ERIC provision from the recent 2 assembly bills. So this is what we do at AMAC. We give our members the tools and the voice to push back at scale, not just with email, not just with phone calls, but with real organized advocacy. And, that's really the power of AMAC Action and our grassroots advocacy arm.
What's next for this legislation?
So great question. What's next? Not just for the bill in Albany, but for ERIC itself, because this isn't just about one state. This is about data integrity. So voter roll accuracy and election security, let's be clear, the voter rolls are the most important layer of any election. They're the front door to our democracy. So if they're bloated, if they're broken, if they're filled with bad data, then the entire system is vulnerable. So ERIC was supposed to fix that. Instead, it's really made things worse. So what's next? We expose what ERIC has been doing and not doing. So we call on more states to exit the program, which has already been happening since 2012. And we push for real, transparent, citizen-focused reforms that not just verify, not assume, but because the vote is sacred, we need actual verifiable information on the voter rolls. And if we can't trust how our voter rolls are managed, we can't trust the outcome. So at AMAC, we're not letting this go, not in New York, not in anywhere in the country.
So let me just get this straight, Charles. So you mentioned driver's license before. So what? These are fake driver's licenses? I mean, or they're, because if they're non-citizens, how does the driver's license thing work? Because then at that point, they potentially get to be registered through the system. I'm trying to understand that part of it.
So in New York, for example, I'm sure you're aware of the green light bill, which essentially gives non-citizens in New York State the ability to get a valid driver's license. Now, the ERIC system, by its own bylaws, by its own documentation, which you can find, does not explicitly require verification of citizenship status from the DMV rolls it's collecting from various states. So think about that. Put those two things together. New York State is allowing non-citizens to get a driver's license, and ERIC, the one who's claiming to clean up voter rolls. In addition, what we found is they're not just cleaning up rolls, they're finding out for, let's say, for example, in Virginia, 180 or 160,000 either dead people or people who are moved out of the state that they recommended are eligible but unregistered voters. So you have the combination of giving non-citizens a driver's license and a system that does not even look to see if they're a citizen. I mean, you can put the two things together and understand why we're concerned.
Wow. This ERIC guy sounds very dangerous. Wow. My goodness.
Exactly.
Hey, Charles, thank you so much. By the way, real quick, give everybody the address where they can go, web address for AMAC.
So yeah, if you want to get involved with AMAC Action, do us a favor and go to amac.us/sunrise. Support this program, support Real America's Voice, and support AMAC. By becoming an AMAC member, you get put onto the rolls for our calls to action. This means every time we run a specific statewide call to action, you get sent an email asking you to engage. It's very simple to respond to our calls to action. You write the letter, we provide it for you, and it contacts your congressional representative. So it's a system that we've been using for years. We do tens of thousands of emails, phone calls to state legislators on your behalf in your name. So go to amac.us/sunrise. Join as an AMAC member today and start to get involved. That's how we change things here in this country.
Okay. Well, Charles, thanks for being here. Great information. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, guys.
Charles. All right. Coming up, we're going to have that White House press briefing on common sense. Therefore, it won't be anything that has to do with Joe Biden. Don't worry. Coming up, though, as well, May begins Mental Health Awareness Month. How can people best take care of themselves? We're going to have some very helpful tips ahead on American Sunrise. Back in a moment, everybody.
Welcome back to American Sunrise. I'm Dr. G. We are so glad you are with us. We have a press briefing, as you know, coming up any minute. We will break and go to that the moment it does. But for now, it is time for today's health news, and that is sponsored, of course, by The Wellness Company. And under the microscope today, guess what, you guys? It is Mental Health Awareness Month, and we have some great tips to keep your mental health going strong. That's right. The first tip is write down the goals of self-care for the month. The things that you want to do, make sure you get done for your mental health. This way, when life gets tough or things get hard, you have those goals handy to bring you right back up. The second tip, spend some time out in nature. Take a walk. I can't emphasize this enough. Smell the flowers. Listen, I do this every single day. I stop and smell the flowers. I really do. It's a weird little ritual I have walking from my car to my house. I have a lot of flowers planted, and I stop and I smell them on my way in and out of the house almost every time. This improves your mental health. It relaxes you. It grounds you, especially if you take off your shoes and walk on the bare sand or the bare whatever you have, dirt, whatever you have, grass. It's good. And also, just be sure you keep your mind active by staying in a hobby you enjoy. Hobbies gives you something to look forward to. It exercises your brain and uses parts of your brain you don't use in just daily living. Finally, create a calm space in your home. Have one space, you keep it clean, you keep it free of clutter and things that stress you. Use that space to do the things you love, too, like maybe the hobby, maybe some painting, maybe some reading, maybe some praying. The unwinding is the key to relaxation and clearing your mind of the anxieties of the day. If you or any of your friends, though, are having issues, do this. Call 988-LIFELINE for free assistance. Keep that in mind. It's a new day in America, new administration in Washington, D.C. A lot of excitement and optimism about the future, but the reality, there's a lot of work to do, too, when it comes to fixing our broken healthcare system. The problems we've created with our bad governance are not going to simply go away. The challenges our system faces won't disappear overnight either. So now more than ever, you want to be prepared. That, my friends, is where the Wellness Company comes in. Their doctors are medical professionals. You can trust them. Their line of prescription med kits are the gold standard when it comes to keeping you safe and healthy. Whether it's the medical emergency kit, the contagion kit, the first aid kit, the travel kit, these prescription kits contain an assortment of life-saving medications and guidebooks to tell you how to use the meds in the kit. From flu to strep to COVID to bird flu, a trip to the beach, a trip overseas, the Wellness Company has a prescription kit designed to keep you and your family safe. make America healthy again. You guys, it starts at home. So do your part and protect the health of you and your family. Go to twc.health/RAV today. Give it an order. That's twc.health/RAV. Use the promo code RAV. That'll save you 10%. David, do we have press secretary appearing yet?
No, I haven't seen a sighting yet. We're understanding, guys, that I think it's moved till 9 a.m. Eastern. That's what we're hearing. So what is that? Is that about 25 minutes or so? No, 20 minutes. I can't do math. But so
right at 20
I guess we're gonna. Yeah, we're going to vamp for 20 minutes. No, we're not. We're not going to vamp, but we are going to vamp for a couple minutes here at least. But if you think about this revolution of common sense, and I love that saying, the words that President Trump used about his agenda, because that is really true. I mean, right, Terrance, you think about it, right? DEI gone. Once again, all this is, they're going to challenge every single thing in court. But from an executive order standpoint, DEI gone, two genders, keeping men out of women's sports. My goodness, I can go down the list. English as the official language of the United States. I mean, there's just so much there. We haven't even talked about immigration, all that other stuff. But just from a social conservative perspective, or at least I should really say Judeo-Christian heritage perspective, it's been just spot on, T. Bates.
Yeah, and just to be clear, that's kind of the theme for this upcoming press briefing, the revolution of common sense. Stephen Miller is going to join Caroline Leavitt there in the press briefing room to discuss. And it really has kind of been the identity, if you will, of this new administration. Many of the policies that have come out of this administration have been rooted simply in common sense. They're not even policies, if you will. They're not political. It's kind of this whole change in perspective. And that perspective, again, is rooted in common sense, Dr. Gina. And that's one of the things I think President Trump and this entire administration, his cabinet members included, have really prided themselves on.
Yeah, I think this is a chance for the Trump administration to set the record straight to the legacy media audience that they don't get to say much to. We know that most of the news that they report about President Trump is negative. And so this is a way for President Trump to go, hey, no, look, this is what we're doing. And Caroline Leavitt has certainly been a great spokesperson in all of that. But you know what? There are a lot of people around President Trump that are really good spokespeople. You're a big fan of the guy coming up today, right, David?
I am. Stephen Miller. I mean, talk about putting the media in its place. I mean, he just waxes poetic. And he's like, have you read the Alien and Enemies Act of 1798? Do you understand what's going on? They're like, no. Well, that's not my question. My question was, no. Have you read the act? I mean, he just dresses them down every single day. Terrance, I do want to just quickly bring up something you mentioned about the priorities of what they're doing, which is so true. At the same time, these are executive orders. And so, in essence, even though they're not codified into law, they are codified into codes and regulations right now inside the American governmental system. And so, therefore, when you have when you say there are two genders, or you're keeping men out of women's sports, that's all tied to federal funding. So, good luck trying to get federal funds if you're not playing by the rules. So there's a real tangible effect, not just from this is common sense and this esoteric stuff. This is really affecting states in a good way, or they're going to have to play by the new rules of the road, Dr. G. And Terrance.
David,
and anybody that would like
to
take this.
I'm sorry. I think you make a great point that the executive orders truly are setting the stage or setting the table for a change in terms of perspective from a government perspective. And they're really changing things and creating an atmosphere. But we've talked about this ad nauseum, and I think we're going to continue to talk about it. The executive orders are only as good as the administration in which they're passed. And so the next step has got to be that Congress take these executive orders and take the table that has been set and now put some food on it and make it really last. And that is going to be the challenge. Congress has got to pass some of these things, codify. That's the term we always use. It is the accurate term. I hate it, though. I feel like it's some sort of wound. I feel like it's suture and codify should be the same thing. But the reality is Congress has got to codify these executive orders and make them law. Otherwise, they're just a Band-Aid. It's not a full, it's not a repair of the wound. Dr. Gina.
Yeah.
That's right. But it gives everybody a chance, I think, to see if these policies were codified into law, how common sense they really are. So I think we'll be talking more about that a little bit later. You all, thank you for this. Listen, I lived there, I left. Coming up, left coast insanity. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass willing to risk federal funding to maintain her city's sanctuary status for illegals. We're going to take a closer look at that with you. And also later, who will be the next pope? Do you know? Do you have a guess? A recent shakeup to the Papal conclave is catapulting some unlikely candidates to the forefront. We're going to tell you about it. We'll be right back. All the fun starts again in just 2 minutes.
All right, everybody, welcome back. Time now to stay awake, not woke. It's brought to us by the 1775 Coffee Company. Boy, I love this coffee. If you care about what goes in your body like you care about what's happening to this country, well, this is for you. 1775 just dropped their new Rejuvenate blend. It's the first coffee of its kind. It's crafted to help you feel stronger, stay sharper, and support healthy aging with every cup. It's a bold dark roast infused with CAAKG. It's a clinically studied ingredient that's shown to support longevity and help reduce biological age. So right now you can grab their longevity bundle. It's everything you need to upgrade your morning routine for just $99. But they only made 1,000 of them, and once they're gone, that's it. They're gone for good. So this is what it includes: 2 bags of the Rejuvenate anti-aging coffee. It's a rare pea berry roast, one of the most elite beans on earth. Less than 5% of coffee crops worldwide. And exclusive 1775 merch. I like saying merch, that you won't find in stores, designed for people who still believe in America first. It's a small batch, single origin, roasted fresh every week in Miami. This is not corporate lab junk, no watered down blends, just real coffee with one powerful proven ingredient. So head to 1775coffee.com/Rav and grab your longevity bundle while you still can. It's coffee that wakes you up. It fuels your body. That is true. I have it every day and reminds you what freedom tastes like. All right, now that we're caffeinated, let's stay awake and not woke. And one of the most woke mayors in America, well, there's a lot of them, but how about LA's Karen Bass out there on the left coast? She's now saying, wait for it, it's worth it to risk federal funding in order to protect illegals in her city. During a recent interview with the local NBC station, Bass admitted that federal funding has been crucial for victims of the recent Palisades fire, but she's not willing to risk her city sanctuary city status, saying illegals are more important than the Los Angeles residents impacted by the fires. Because when asked if it was worth it to risk federal funding, this is what she said.
Worth it to maintain LA status as a sanctuary city if it risks.
It is worth it. It is worth it to protect all Angelenos, regardless of when they got here.
Well, let's bring in Dr. G and T. Bates for more. So Karen Bass clearly thinking she wants to make sanctuary cities great again. And you've got Chris Van Hollen sipping margaritas with Kilgar Abrego Garcia. Gina, the Democrats have a lot of problems, and this just adds to the list.
It really does. I mean, it consecrates their attitude toward their own citizens. And they don't care, as you put it, and I think you put it so well, they care more about the illegals than they do about the American citizens that elected them, by the way, because I don't think a lot of illegals voted for them, and maybe some have now, but at least probably not originally. And this is really a matter of priorities in this country, and I think it's a defining moment in this country. And I think, I don't care if you're a Republican or Democrat, this is a bipartisan issue. When your elected officials care more about people that didn't elect them, that they're not even answering to, right, who are not even citizens of this country, than they do you, something's really off there.
Whoever is advising her is an idiot. I'm just going to put it out there. Whoever is advising her to say that sort of thing is an idiot. I think I've shared with you guys before. An old boss of mine used to use the term, that's a career-limiting opportunity. Well, that statement is a career-limiting opportunity. That's the kind of thing that gets you voted out of office, particularly when you're talking about people who are trying to rebuild their lives. The Palisades fire took entire communities. It burned entire communities down, and those people are depending on money from the federal government in order to try and rebuild a semblance of what they once had. And if your mayor is saying, oh yeah, I'm willing to risk all of that for people who don't pay taxes here, for people who are in this country illegally, that's the sort of thing, particularly when you're dealing with an emotional loss like having lost your home, that's the kind of thing that will encourage you to go to the ballot box when it is time to vote, and you vote against that sort of attitude. That's a career-limiting opportunity. And with that sort of idea, I can't see her being reelected. Just my 2 cents. Again, I don't have a vote in California, specifically in LA. Go ahead, David. I saw you shaking your head, so I'm ready for your criticism.
No, you're absolutely right. I agree with 100% of what you have to say. And let me just also say, it's interesting, the Democrats, so they want sanctuary cities. So they want protection for illegals. They want a sanctuary for illegals. And President Trump is doing a sanctuary for actual Americans to be, making sure that they're protected from the crime of illegals. I mean, that kind of says everything, you need to know. There's two different sanctuaries going on. What sanctuary do you want? Do you want the sanctuary for illegal immigrants? Or do you want the sanctuary for the American citizens to be protected from folks that are committing crimes, whether they be illegal or not?
Yeah, and I think right along that point, David, what makes me angrier than just about anything I'm hearing out there today is when they start to try to turn it to, oh, this is about protecting children. President Trump wants to deport children. No, the parents made the decisions. American citizens who commit crimes go to prison every single day and have to decide what to do with their children. This is no different. They committed a crime. They have to decide what to do with their children. I know it's a side note, but I'm really hearing a lot of this, and it's sticking with leftist audiences, and I think we need to battle back at that narrative.
That's right. And they get a choice. They get a choice when they're deported. You have children.
Take your kids
what do you want to do? That's right. Take them with you.
Take your kids with you.
Take them with you.
Yeah.
100%.
Please. Yeah.
100%. All right. Coming up, our moment of faith. And guess what? It's National Day of Prayer. So we're going to talk about the recent shakeup to the Papal conclave. It's raising questions about who might become the next pope. Details after the break. Back in a moment.
In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth.
All right, welcome back to American Sunrise. It is time now for our moment of faith, and it is brought to us by Lee Greenwood and the God Bless the USA Bible. And in focus today, on this National Day of Prayer, by the way, don't forget, but I hope you pray every day. As the world continues to mourn the death of Pope Francis, the Papal Conclave convening to elect who will succeed the Pope's legacy in the Catholic Church. This is getting interesting. I don't know if you saw the movie, but a shakeup to the Cardinals' decision-making process might be happening as Cardinal Angelo Becciu has withdrawn his name from the vote. Once a close ally of Pope Francis, Becciu was forced to resign as head of the Congregation for the Causes of Saints following allegations of financial misconduct. He has since been convicted and sentenced to more than 5 years in prison. He's appealing this sentence, but Pope Francis asked him to bow out of the conclave. And this was in a series of letters shortly before the Pope's death. So now all eyes are on who might be the next Pope. So let's bring in David and Terrance for a little bit more. You guys, watching this is so interesting, and I'm not Catholic. Obviously, I did go through Catholic school, so I understand probably just enough to be dangerous, and that's about it. But it is fascinating because the Pope does shape culture, David.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's no doubt about that. And so I think it's consequential in that sense. And the media obviously gives it a lot of attention, and rightly so. And not to mention, how many Catholics are there around the world? Billions?
Lots and lots.
1.4 billion, I think. Something like that.
That's right.
It's like 1.4 billion, something like that, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. So I think it's a consequential decision as to what's going to come up. I mean, I have no idea. I mean, I haven't checked the betting odds on the conclave. I'm not in Vegas. I haven't gone online. So I don't know. I will say this on a separate note. I have seen the movie Conclave, which, by the way, is a great movie, until the end. Until the end. And then it got a little, squirrely. But the point is, I love that movie. I'm sorry. You asked me about other stuff, but I just wanted to talk about the movie.
David, you're hilarious. I actually enjoyed the movie as well, though, I must say. Like, it turned out to be family movie night for us. So, Dr. Gina, here, I couldn't tell you who it's ultimately going to be because so much happens behind closed doors during a papal conclave. But one of the things that I'm watching, just the other day, President Trump was asked if he had a favorite, and he said, oh, yeah, there's a cardinal out of New York that I'd like to see. Of course, that's America first. I get it. I think to some degree, he probably meant it, but to some degree, I think that was in jest. If that cardinal actually wins, though, I suspect within moments, everyone's going to come out and be like, wow, Trump really does have his finger on the pulse of the world. And more importantly, a Trump endorsement even goes as far as the Vatican. Like, if that happens, that I think is going to be a huge story. Like, that would be crazy in my mind.
My understanding is that to have a pope from the Americas, they feel like they already did, of course, with the last pope being from Argentina. And so having another pope from the Americas, my understanding is that is extremely unlikely within the conclave because they feel like they already had a pope from the Americas. And I know exactly what David Brody is thinking. David Brody is thinking of President Trump saying he thinks he would make a good pope, which just cracked us all up. That was such a good
That's exactly what I was thinking. Yeah, he came out and said, I'd love to be pope.
I knew it, David.
I love it. Popus.
I got you. All right, you guys, listen, we will be back with the second hour of American Sunrise in just 2 minutes. Don't go away.
Introducing the limited edition God Bless the USA Bible, inspired by Lee Greenwood's hit song and the most recognized patriotic anthem in America, God Bless the USA. The God Bless the USA large print leather-bound King James Bible also contains America's founding documents, the U.S. Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence, and the Pledge of Allegiance, along with a handwritten chorus to Lee Greenwood's song, God Bless the USA. With its large print and slim design, This Bible invites you to explore God's Word anywhere, anytime. The God Bless the USA Bible makes the perfect gift and cherished family heirloom keepsake to pass on to future generations. Designed for an easy reading experience in the trusted King James Version translation, this large print Bible is perfect to take to church, Bible study, work, and for traveling. Order yours today at GodBlessTheUSABible.com.
Coming up on the second hour of American Sunrise, a Milwaukee judge who allegedly helped an illegal alien escape deportation has been temporarily relieved of her duties. So what happens next? We'll discuss. And Elon Musk didn't need to help America, but he did it. Now that Musk is set to significantly cut back his work with the White House, what becomes of the cost-cutting Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE? We will discuss that as well. Also, Dim probe denied. House Republicans stopped Democrat effort to investigate U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's controversial use of the Signal chat. That story, so much more, just ahead. Hour 2 of American Sunrise starts right now.
Good morning, America.
Welcome to American Sunrise.
Whether it's culture,
we have breaking news to share with you.
Politics.
President Trump is joining us live now from Florida.
We've got you covered.
This is what it looks like to be a patriot.
We have to protect the American family.
The American dream is still alive.
I'm David Brody.
I'm Terrance.
And I'm Dr. Gina.
Welcome back, everybody, to the second hour of American Sunrise. I'm David Brody, coming to you from D.C. Let's bring in Dr. G. She is in Tampa this morning. T. Bates in our Denver newsroom. Good morning to both of you. Gina, we're waiting for Stephen Miller and Caroline Levitt. We've been talking about it all morning. It should happen any moment. Always love to hear what Stephen Miller has to say, and I just feel like there's going to be some sort of history lesson 101 for the media, so they might want to take note this morning.
Yeah, and are all the legacy media channels still running it? I mean, they kind of have to, right?
I doubt it.
No.
I doubt it.
Exactly. They should.
No
Will
way.
they? Probably not. That would be.
I don't even think.
Yeah,
Fox.
actually,
You want to put another steak dinner on it, Dr. Gina? You want to put a wager?
No.
My wager
Here
would
we
be
go.
the legacy media is not going to run it. You want to pay for another steak
Not
dinner?
running
You
it.
want to put a wager on it?
But
Yeah,
you're right,
we just
Gina.
confirmed,
You're right.
actually,
They should.
They don't run
They
it.
should.
And they didn't run the cabinet meeting yesterday as well. So, if that doesn't tell you everything you need to know about the balanced nature, rather imbalanced nature, the bias really of the legacy media, I mean, that spells it out right there.
Yeah, we ran it here on Real America's Voice, so I am going to pat ourselves on the back. We ran it in its entirety here on Real America's Voice, and it was newsworthy. Like, that would be my argument, David. It's the first 100 days. Even the mainstream media makes so much of what happened. What did he do in the first 100 days? Well, this is an opportunity on day 100 to play it, to hear directly from him, and more importantly, to hear from his cabinet secretaries about what they've been doing during the first 100 days. I think it was newsworthy, and I'm glad that we covered it. We were responsible journalists here on Real America's Voice, I would say.
Absolutely. And if you're a liberal media outlet, and because you just want to trash Trump anyhow, so why don't you cover it and then go ahead and try to fact check him in real time, or fact check the cabinet members? I'm not saying they should do that, but I'm just simply saying that in other words, there's value for them to take it, even if you have an anti-Trump bias. I mean, you could. He's always good for ratings, so it just makes sense from a rating standpoint to do that. And let's also remember the media was there for all of it, and so the media is asking questions too. So there's news coming out of it. It just doesn't make much sense for them not to take it.
But David, I don't think they want. Yeah. I don't think they want President Trump to be able to communicate at all with their audience. On the outside chance, he'll say something so common sense, which he does all the time, and the light bulbs will go off for them, and they'll do the real waking up, like a lot of people in our audience have done. I mean, not everybody's always been a conservative. Some of them, they just saw something that made a lot of sense once and went, wait, if I question that, then maybe I have to question everything that the propagandists have told me my whole entire life. And they did, and now they're, some of the best conservatives out there. So, David, I think that's what they're afraid of.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and that's exactly why they're doing it. And it kind of makes me think of the Hunter laptop story. suppression. I mean, they're doing this all the time, and so this idea that we always talk about liberal bias, and we talk about the words that are spoken. No, it's not just the words that are spoken; it's the words that are unspoken, the stories that are not covered, what is glossed over. I mean, the Biden mental health story is a perfect and a big, huge example of that. So, what do they cover? What do they not cover? And they don't want to cover this president because they know he's speaking. Well, I say they know he's speaking common sense. I don't think they know he's speaking common sense. I think they think he's speaking gibberish. But the American people know that he's speaking common sense, and they're scared to death of that, T. Bates.
No, absolutely. And I would say that it's not just the American people. Some of that rejection of the common sense even goes onto Capitol Hill vis-a-vis the U.S. Senate. Last night, we, of course, saw that vote where the Senate was trying to push back against President Trump's tariffs. Several Republicans crossing the aisle to vote with Democrats to try to hamstring President Trump's tariffs. Fortunately, that vote failed, but it was largely thanks to Vice President J.D. Vance going up there to Capitol Hill to vote against the measure as well. And I think that common sense, it seems to most of us from the outside looking in that President Trump has a plan. Now, whether it's going to work or not, time is going to tell. But the way he's explained it and what he's trying to accomplish seems to make common sense. But there's still even some Republican senators who are pushing back against that common sense idea, Dr. Gina.
Yeah, they're going to continue to push back against everything that is common sense. The problem is the American people have a lot of common sense. I think that's why they relate to the common people like J.D. Vance, that just kind of came out of a common place, and the common sense nature of President Trump. We're going to go now to Caroline. Caroline Levitt has taken the
take your
stand
questions,
there.
But first, some remarks. At 11 o'clock, President Trump will participate in a National Day of Prayer event where he will invite Americans of all faiths across the country to join him in asking for God's continued blessings over our great country. During the event, the president will sign an executive order establishing a Religious Liberty Commission. Later today, President Trump will travel to the University of Alabama to deliver a commencement address to the graduating class of 2025. Last night, we saw yet again why President Trump is our deal maker in chief. We secured a historic agreement to establish the United States-Ukraine Reconstruction Investment Fund. This is a first of its kind economic partnership for the reconstruction and long-term economic success of Ukraine that both the United States that the United States will greatly benefit from. This partnership represents the United States taking an economic stake in securing a free, peaceful, and sovereign future for Ukraine. This partnership establishes a fund that will receive 50% of royalties, license fees, and other similar payments from natural resource projects in Ukraine. President Trump has been clear from the beginning. He wants the killing in this brutal war to end. This agreement shows how invested the president is in securing a truly lasting peace. To mark President Trump's triumphant first 100 days in office, we've detailed all week how President Trump has been hard at work delivering on the promises he made to the American people. And yesterday, the president once again showcased why he is the most transparent and accessible president in American history when he held his fourth open press cabinet meeting. Every cabinet secretary went into great detail, explaining how their respective agencies are making life better for American families and businesses. And then the president allowed all of you to ask questions on anything you wanted afterwards. One of the main reasons President Trump won nearly 80 million votes, swept all 7 battleground states, and received a resounding mandate from the American public is because of the contrast he presented during the campaign and continues to this day. Everything President Trump's agenda is grounded in one thing: common sense. While the Democrat Party went off the deep end and doubled down on pure craziness, President Trump pledged to restore common sense back to the United States of America. In a little more than 3 months, that's exactly what he's done. He recognized that America is a sovereign nation that cannot survive if it does not protect its territorial borders. So he secured the border in record time and ended the mass invasion of tens of millions of illegal aliens into our homeland. The president knows his top responsibility is ensuring the safety of the American people, which is why he's arresting violent illegal alien invaders in our communities who threaten our public safety. And it's unacceptable to President Trump to allow rampant waste, fraud, and abuse of Americans' precious tax dollars, which is why the president championed a historic DOGE effort that saved nearly $200 billion already. President Trump knows America is blessed with an abundance of liquid gold below our feet in the form of fossil fuels. So he ended Joe Biden's reckless war on American energy and is restoring American energy dominance to lower costs and strengthen our national security. President Trump believes Americans should be free to drive whatever car they want. So he ended Joe Biden's disastrous EV mandate and promoted true consumer choice. President Trump stood up for the Constitution's promise of colorblind equality before the law, so he terminated radical DEI preferencing and federal contracting and directed federal agencies to relentlessly combat private sector discrimination. DEI seeks to divide and pit Americans against each other based on immutable characteristics. President Trump put an end to it. In President Trump's America, individual dignity, hard work, and excellence are the only things that will determine if you get ahead. President Trump is a proud free speech champion, which is why he ended Joe Biden's trampling of free speech rights and the federal government's censorship of American speech on online platforms. The president believes college students have a right to speak their minds and go to school safely. Again, common sense. So he took bold action to protect Jewish American students from harassment by pro-Hamas radicals on their campuses. And President Trump knows that America's children are our future, and he'll never stop fighting for them. That's why he ended the radical, un-American indoctrination of children by eliminating support for divisive, radical gender ideology and equity ideology, and why the president protected parents' fundamental rights. And lastly, the president believes in fundamental biology. Isn't that something? Which is why he made it the official policy of the United States government that there are only 2 sexes, male and female. And because men and women are biologically different, President Trump ended the unfair, demeaning practice of forcing women to compete against men in sports and having their private spaces invaded. When President Trump promised a complete restoration of America and the revolution of common sense, he meant it. And over the next 100 days, get ready for historic trade deals, budget deals, and peace deals. For more on President Trump's common sense revolution, I will turn it over to our White House Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy, Stephen Miller. Stephen, thanks for coming in today.
Thank you, Caroline. Great to be up here with you, and great to see so many familiar faces I've had a chance to get to know over a number of years as we gather this morning to continue our celebration of President Trump's unprecedented and historic first 100 days in office, what are without doubt the greatest 100 days to begin any American presidency in the history of this nation. This week, you've heard about the historic actions President Trump has taken to secure our homeland, to secure our sovereignty, to secure our economy and our supply chains and our industrial base. Today, you're also going to hear from me about what President Trump has done to secure our values, our culture, and our way of life from the unwavering assault from the radical left and the communists and the Democrat Party. One of the most significant crises that President Trump inherited upon taking office was the wave of racial discrimination, so-called diversity, equity, and inclusion policies that have taken over both public sector and private sector entities all across the United States of America. Perhaps the most dramatic example of this is that our air traffic controllers were being hired and promoted based on race and gender, not their ability to conduct our nation's air traffic. I would estimate that probably 90% of Americans would agree with the statement that airline safety should be based on your ability to keep, airline safety jobs should be based on your ability to keep planes landing and taking off and flying safely, not on what demographic box you check. President Trump has ended across the entire federal government all hiring, recruiting, retention, promotion, and training based on race and sex. This includes in our law enforcement agencies. So again, when we took office, even in sensitive law enforcement, national security, and intelligence agencies, we were hiring individuals not on their ability to carry a weapon, not on their ability to keep Americans safe, not on their ability to conduct sensitive intelligence operations, but based upon race and sex. And obviously, that is unacceptable. It's going to be merit-based across the whole federal government. But this wasn't just the federal government. This was the private sector, and this was also, of course, our entire university and education system. So President Trump's Department of Justice, working with other departments and agencies, have made clear that this administration is going to fully enforce Title VI, Title VII, and Title IX of our federal civil rights code. Discrimination based on race and sex is prohibited by law, and this administration will vigorously enforce that. And companies, small or large, that violate plain text of federal statutes will face appropriate financial and other penalties. This administration is not going to let our society devolve into communist, woke, DEI strangulation. We are going to have a system of merit, which is not just a social and cultural issue, it's an economic issue. When you hire, retain, and recruit based on merit, as President Trump has directed, you advance innovation, you advance growth, you advance investment, you advance job creation, you create the best and safest product for all Americans. When a citizen goes to, say, a hospital in a medical emergency, they don't care what race or sex their doctor or their nurse is. They want the best treatment they can get in that emergency. When they're flying a plane or when they're on an aircraft, they want that pilot to be the best pilot, the safest pilot, not caring what that pilot's race or sex is. This applies across the whole government. In particular, looking at our university system, this administration has opened investigations into universities across the country for violating, we talk a lot about Supreme Court rulings. Universities across this country are in plain and direct violation of the Supreme Court's ruling that affirmative action, as in racial quotas and set-asides, are illegal. Students must be admitted to universities on a color-blind basis. But we have demonstrated through clear evidence that our university system, including our medical schools, and perhaps particularly our medical schools, are engaging in race-based discrimination, racial set-asides, racial quota schemes, and other efforts to evade the Supreme Court's ruling, and again, the plain text of federal statute. So universities are on notice, and universities are already facing the financial consequences of their noncompliance with federal law. The clearest example that we're all familiar with, of course, being Harvard, which is engaged in repeat, systemic, and sustained violations of federal civil rights law. Another area of civil rights law that we talk about a lot, of course, is Title IX, sex-based discrimination. And this administration ended the Biden administration's policy and the Democrat Party's policy of allowing men into women's sports, men into women's spaces. We are using every single legal and financial tool we have at President Trump's direction to make it clear that schools and universities are are and will lose federal funds, as you've seen in Maine, if you allow men to invade women's sports and women's spaces. And this applies to our whole K-12 system. The Department of Justice is also coordinating with state and local law enforcement to fight child abuse in our school systems. It is child abuse to change a child's gender, particularly if you do not inform the parents. In other words, if a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old goes to school, or a 7-year-old goes to school, and the teacher tries to turn the boy into a girl or the girl into a boy, that is child abuse. And this administration is treating that as child abuse. And it is a gross violation of parental rights. This also includes the administration's message to our hospital systems that they cannot and will not be allowed to use taxpayer dollars to perform chemical castrations and sexual mutilations of children. Castration surgeries, castration drugs, sterilization treatments of children are barbaric. They violate all sound medical ethics. They are completely unwarranted. They harm children for life irreversibly. It is child torture. It is child abuse. It is medical malpractice. And so the Department of Health and Human Services, under the leadership of Bobby Kennedy, as well as the Department of Justice and other departments of this government, are making clear to our medical providers and our hospital systems that you cannot use taxpayer dollars to perform these barbaric procedures on America's children. And HHS has systematically eliminated all of the junk, fake science that was produced under the Biden administration, promoting sex changes on children, promoting the idea of sterilizing children. That's been cleaned out. That's been removed, and new guidance is being issued to doctors and hospitals advising them that they cannot perform these horrifying procedures, these irreversible procedures on our nation's children. We are also making clear in our prison system, male prisoners will not be allowed into women's prisons. The Biden administration promoted prison rape by putting men into female prisons. That is obviously insane, cruel, and unacceptable. And even though the Democrat Party and Hakeem Jeffries and the Democrat media continue to fight to put men into women's prisons, this administration will not allow that. And will not allow men as well in our K-12 system into women's private spaces and restrooms. We've seen horrifying example after example of young girls being sexually assaulted because school districts have allowed men into women's and girls' private spaces. This administration, President Trump, is at the forefront of protecting women and protecting girls. And nowhere is that clearer than when we are talking about fighting radical gender ideology. This administration is also fighting to get critical race theory out of our school districts. Children will be taught to love America. Children will be taught to be patriots. Children will be taught civic values for schools that want federal taxpayer funding. So as we close the Department of Education and we provide funding to states, we are going to make sure that these funds are not being used to promote communist ideology. For any nation to be successful, it cannot teach its children to hate themselves and to hate their country. So these are a few of the areas in which President Trump has fought the cancerous communist woke culture that was destroying this country, where we were led to believe that men were women, that women were men, that racial discrimination was good, that merit was bad, and that safety and physical security mattered less than the feelings of liberal ideologues. The president has also fought to return the Department of Justice to its core mission of protecting public safety and locking up violent criminals, instead of using the Department of Justice to target conservatives, to target Christians, to target people of faith. The last administration cruelly and shamefully used the power of the Justice Department to go after law-abiding Americans, in particular Trump supporters, conservatives, and Christians. That persecution has ended. The Department of Justice and the FBI are back in the business of going after bad guys, of going after gangs, of going after criminals, and keeping Americans safe. Let me just conclude before taking questions by noting that when you look at the sweep of the first 100 days, every single crisis that has afflicted America for years, sometimes decades, sometimes generations, this president has fought head on. He has taken on every entrenched power structure and system all across this government, this swamp, this town. That includes, of course, the Doge efforts to slash corrupt, wasteful government spending, graft, and corruption, and to stop billions of taxpayer dollars from going to radical left NGOs. These are left-wing nonprofits that are used to advance illegal immigration, to advance open borders, to advance gender ideology, and to advance all of this insanity that has been turning our country in the wrong direction for so many years. President Trump took head on the trade crisis afflicting this country with the destruction of our manufacturing and industrial base, the shameful betrayal of the American worker by Joe Biden and the globalists that sent all of our supply chains overseas. He took head on the catastrophe of mass, unlimited illegal immigration that was turning us into a failed third world state, and achieved the lowest level of illegal immigration in recorded history without even a close second. He took on the economic crisis afflicting this country by reopening American energy, by defeating inflation, by lowering gas prices, by ending the onslaught and reversing the onslaught of federal regulation, by reopening coal, shale, oil, natural gas, and fighting now for the largest tax cut and reform and the largest deregulation reform and the largest energy reform in American history. These are just some of the things that have ushered in the new golden age, along with his fight to restore the peace that we had for 4 years under the previous administration before Joe Biden sunk this planet into bloodshed and war in the Middle East, in Europe, and rising tensions in Asia. President Trump, in every area of conflict around the globe, has been fighting to restore peace, security, stability, harmony. So he inherited an economic catastrophe, a border catastrophe, a public safety catastrophe, and a cultural catastrophe. And in every case, he has reversed those catastrophes and brought America into the new golden age. So I thank you for your time, and I look forward to any questions you have.
Awesome. Thank you, Stephen. And as always, we'll start with our new media seat today. Chris Bedford from the Blaze Media. Why don't you kick us off?
Thank you very much. Stephen, what is the end goal of the China tariffs right now? Is the idea to open up the Chinese markets through a deal to a better market for exporting American goods to China? Or is it a reconfiguration of global trade in a way that isolates China from free countries?
No. So China is a unique situation. Obviously, the president has talked at length about what happened to us economically since China's entrance into the World Trade Organization and the trillions and trillions of dollars of trade deficits that we've racked up with China over the period of that time, and what that's meant for our national security, what that's meant for our economic security, what that's meant for our supply chains. Obviously, right now, the Secretary of the Treasury is in the process of developing a plan that will answer the questions that you're talking about, but the president's goals have been very clear on these points, which is that he is not going to allow China to continue to steal our intellectual property, to continue to illegally dump and subsidize their goods in our markets, to manipulate their currency, to rack up an unsustainable trade deficit. We need to have a trade relationship with China that does not do harm to our nation's economic and national security. And that has to be the guidepost of any objective. At the same time, tariffs will bring significant revenue into this country that will allow us to pursue our dramatic plan of tax cuts and reforms.
Awesome. Bloomberg, go ahead.
Hi. First of all, similar to that question, I'm curious, Kevin Hassett, when on CNBC this morning, said that they were expecting some sort of news on tariffs by the end of the day. Do you have any insight into that?
I don't want to get ahead of any announcement, but I'll just reiterate that right now, countries from all over the world, because of President Trump's leadership, are desperate and dying to make trade deals with the United States. We're going to evaluate each of those deals, and President Trump is personally involved in making sure that these negotiations serve only one interest, which is the interest of the United States of America. And we'll end up with a deal in these cases where, yes, the other countries obviously will have their own demands and their own interests, but nothing will go into effect that doesn't serve the interests of America and the American people.
Thank you. Stephen, this morning GM is putting a dollar figure on how much the president's tariffs will impact the company. The CEO says tariffs will cost GM between $4 and $5 billion this year. The CEO of Ford says he can't commit to not raising prices because of tariffs. Is the administration open to doing more to give automakers relief?
The question, unfortunately, misses the entire point, which is that U.S. automakers have announced dramatic investments and expansions inside the United States. American auto plants are growing, they're expanding, they're opening new facilities, they're expanding existing facilities that are already in operation, because it is now the case that for the first time in our lives, that American cars receive preference in America's markets. The U.S. auto industry used to control the entire world. I believe the number during the heyday was that 70% of all cars in the world were made in Michigan. And now, of course, we've become a tiny fraction of the global market. And the reason for that is because the United States opened its markets to every single foreign cheater and every single foreign nation that subsidized its goods on the face of the earth, and their markets have been closed to ours. Japan closed their market to our cars. The entire EU closed their market to our cars. South Korea closed their market to our cars. All of the countries I just mentioned have tens of billions of dollars of annual trade deficits in automobiles with the United States. These are supposedly pure nations, nations that have at least a somewhat equivalent per capita GDP. So it is impossible under the terms of fair trade, if you have two nations with similar per capita GDP, to have such uneven trade flows in automobiles. What the president has done with his car tariff, we have the most desirable market in the world, is if you want to sell cars tariff-free, tax-free to our market, your plant has to operate in the United States. The only alternative to that is to have no U.S. automobile industry whatsoever, which is where this was headed, to be clear. If we stayed on this current path, within a few years, there would have been no U.S. automobile industry. And what little was left of it would have been in Mexico. Because U.S. auto companies have steadily been shifting their supply chains to Mexico, where they believe it is cheaper to make their products. In reality, it'll be cheaper to make them here because there'll be no tariff for anything made in the United States, and we'll have the cheapest energy and the best regulatory environment in the face of the earth.
But in the meantime, while manufacturing ramps up, American consumers may pay more. Do you agree?
Not on cars they won't, because again, there's now a massive economic incentive for automobile producers to expand production in the United States, and whatever they make here, there will be no tariff.
We'll go to the back row. Go ahead.
Thank you, Caroline. Today, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce released a letter to the Trump administration asking for small business tariff relief. They say that's necessary because in order to save small businesses and to stave off a recession. Stephen, is the administration considering small business tariff relief?
The relief for small businesses is going to come in the form of the largest tax cut in American history. A tax cut, by the way, that every single Democrat is planning to vote against. They're voting for a tax hike on every middle-class family of about $4,000. The president has made clear that there will be 100% expensing for investment in the United States. Companies that invest in the United States will be able to deduct 100% of that cost from their tax liability. This will be the most pro-small business tax bill in American history. And at the same time, this is what you have to understand about the plan, is as they're able to do that, as they're able to reshore those supply chains, that also means they'll pay no tariff. So you'll have the lowest tax environment and there'll be no tariff because their production and supply chains will be in the United States.
So that's a no on tariff relief for small businesses in the short term?
It's a yes on tax relief for small businesses. And again, you only pay the tariff for products that are made outside the United States.
Edward.
Yeah, thanks. So on the rare earth mineral deal that was signed last night, when can that deal be operationalized? What's the time frame? And what kind of leverage does that give Ukraine over Russia?
I think the more important point about the Ukraine deal, and I would hopefully have an update for you soon on how quickly it can be operationalized, but we'll be moving at full speed, not only on that mineral deal, by the way, but on every mineral deal that this president has been unleashing. So we're opening up mines all across this country. We're also pursuing energy and mineral deals all over the world. Since the president issued his executive order also on deregulating coal, we've seen dramatic coal production increases already in the United States. So we're taking advantage of the trillions of dollars in coal wealth and mineral wealth that exists in the United States. We're a very mineral-rich country. But with respect to that deal, we'll move it and operationalize it as fast as we possibly can. But it's meant to pay back the United States. This is the key point. For the hundreds of billions of dollars that our taxpayers have spent subsidizing the war in Ukraine. So it is repayment to the United States. And that's one of the most important points to understand about it.
What's the leverage? Does it give? What kind of leverage does it give?
The president's goal, again, is to end the killing, to achieve a peace settlement. That remains, of course, the overriding objective.
Thank you so much, Caroline. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.
This administration has stressed the need for price transparency for things like healthcare bills and concert tickets. So why is it a political and hostile act for Amazon to display price transparency on consumer goods?
Well, I think it's the wrong way of looking at it, which is why would, first of all, that proposal is gone now, but why would Amazon, of all the different things that go into a theoretical price input, right? For example, does Amazon list the cost of California's regulations on everything made in California? Anything you make in California, you have a massive price increase because of the healthcare regulations that are unworkable in that state, because of the labor regulations that are unworkable in that state, because of the subsidies that go to illegal aliens in that state, because of all the bureaucracy. So anything being produced in California has a massive built-in price hike. So why wouldn't Amazon have a list saying if you purchase it in California instead of in Alabama, this is the premium that you pay? That you pay. This was a clear attempt by whoever proposed it originally, I don't know, because Amazon says they were never going to do it, to try to undermine our trade negotiations with China. I'll make another important point on this, which is that there's been many complaints about the fact that there are a lot of products that are sold on Amazon that are actually ripoffs of American products that are then stolen by China, and then they take our IP and they put them into products to try to undersell our manufacturers. So to the extent that we are engaged in labeling issues on Amazon, I would say that would be the most significant one to fix, is making sure we're not undercutting American consumers.
And then one on Abrego Garcia, please. The administration is reportedly inquiring about his return. Is that to check a box for compliance, or does President Trump want him back on U.S. soil, or both?
So, as Secretary Rubio said yesterday in the cabinet meeting, this administration is not going to publicly discuss the inside details of our foreign policy and negotiations with a foreign country. And in particular, we are not going to allow a district court judge to try to become the Secretary of State. Secretary Rubio is the one who, under his leadership and direction at the State Department, is managing the day-to-day relationship with El Salvador. Let's just take a moment, number one, to express our gratitude to El Salvador for agreeing to take some of the most dangerous terrorists off of America's streets and to put them into a safe environment where they cannot continue to engage in acts of terrorism or coordination with the Maduro regime. You may have seen recently an FBI assessment that was unclassified that said that the Maduro regime is using and planning to use Trinidad terrorists to carry out assassination plots on American soil. Now, very few in this room covered that. I'll let you all ask yourselves why you didn't cover it and why your editors didn't assign that story to you. Something I think you should think about on your own. But this is a earth-shattering piece of news. The Biden administration imported a terrorist army that our own FBI assesses is planning assassination strikes on American soil against critics of the Maduro regime. Those are the terrorists that President Trump is finding and apprehending that our Democrat judges and Democrat activists are trying to keep on U.S. soil. Trinidad has the same legal status as Al-Qaeda and ISIS. MS-13 has the same legal status as Al-Qaeda and ISIS. These are foreign terrorists operating on our soil. And our gratitude to El Salvador for agreeing to take custody of these terrorists is immense. With respect to the case that you mentioned, there's now even been more evidence that has been made public of this person's violent, repeated threats and assaults against his spouse, someone who had repeated, documented human trafficking and human smuggling offenses, somebody that has extensively documented membership in MS-13, a terrorist organization, and of course he had MS-13 tattooed on his knuckles. This is a person that was a clear and present danger to the safety of the American people. And it is a sad reflection on the state of our media and many of the outlets represented in this room that you obsessively try to shill for this MS-13 terrorist. Well, no coverage occurred in your papers about any of the Americans that were raped and tortured and murdered by the illegals that Biden was importing into our country. You know, you talk about due process. The Biden administration made the decision to give extensive due process to two Trinidad terrorists that were apprehended at the border just a couple years ago. They were two gentlemen. They were from Venezuela. They were members of Trinidad. The Biden administration Border Patrol apprehended them and made the decision to provide them with extensive due process, put them onto a program known as supervised release, and put them on ankle monitors so that they could go through a lengthy legal, judicial determination as to whether these legal aliens who had just set foot on U.S. soil might want to live in the United States for the rest of their lives. What was the result of that decision? What was the result of that choice that was made? Those two men kidnapped a young girl named Jocelyn Ungary from her family. They beat her, they sexually assaulted her, they tortured her, they stripped her, they murdered her, and they dumped her body. That is what the Biden administration's policy was. Most of your papers never covered her story when it happened. To the extent that you covered it at all, it was because President Trump forced you to cover it by highlighting it repeatedly over and over again. He had to shame you into covering it. And each and every one of you that sides over and over again with these MS-13 terrorists, to the extent that you have the financial means to do so, you all choose to live in condos or homes or houses as far away from these kinds of gangbangers as you possibly can. If I offered any one of you a rent-free home with no taxes to pay in any of these gang neighborhoods, and I said your neighbors are MS-13 terrorists or Mexican mafia or Sinaloa cartel or Tren de Aragua, I couldn't pay you to live there. But yet you, with your coverage, are trying to force innocent Americans to have these people as their neighbors, and that one day their daughter may be abducted from their home and raped and murdered. So you're not going to get an ounce of sympathy from this administration or President Trump for the terrorists who've invaded our homes and our country.
Awesome. Thank you. Peter, we'll take a couple more questions.
A couple questions on DOGE, of course, because that's the topic that you're here to speak about. But I want to ask you one other question about the topic of prices. We heard from the president on this just yesterday, right now, on prices and the risk that there could be some short-term, as he said, shortages. He was referring specifically to dolls. What do you tell Americans right now, Stephen, who say they can't afford to, in the president's words, be patient? Americans who voted for President Trump on his promise that he would lower prices across the board on day one.
But he did lower prices across the board on day one.
Well, grocery prices last month went up 0.4%, of course. So I mean, just across the board, not exclusively eggs.
Inflation, as you would acknowledge, is down substantially. Gas prices are down substantially. The new GDP report showed a 22% record increase in investment in the United States of America. So all of the, and don't even, egg prices, of course, which was all you guys talked about for a few days, I think are down like 80%. The reality is that we can either surrender economically to China, or we can reclaim and reshore our manufacturing base and our industrial needs. And it's not just China. In the event of any national emergency, this is the president's first duty as commander-in-chief. In the event of any national emergency, we cannot be reliant on foreign countries for steel, aluminum, energy, technology, any of the essential components that we need to keep this country running. He is fulfilling his duty as commander-in-chief that every president before him had failed to fulfill or even actively betrayed. And despite inheriting all of this, as I mentioned, inflation down, jobs up, and particularly, by the way, jobs for American workers. So for the first time, you look at these jobs reports, the government workers are going down, which artificially, of course, increased previous job totals. The employment of non-citizens is going down. The employment of American citizens is exploding. Remember, all the job gains during the Biden administration, so-called gains, on net were for foreign workers. So if you look at the stock of American workers over his whole administration, they lost jobs on net. So if you're an American worker, you lived through 4 years of a Biden depression. That was the economic reality that now the President Trump is rescuing. And again, if you make your product in America, there's no tariff. And as we develop advanced manufacturing techniques, increased AI, increased robotics, it'll be cheaper and cheaper and cheaper to manufacture in America.
But to be clear, you said that prices have gone down across the board. The president himself acknowledged that on toys you may end up paying, on dolls he was referring to, you may end up paying a little bit more right now. So in terms of... He was making
the point that I think almost every American consumer agrees with. If they had a choice between and I'm a parent of young children, you had a choice between a doll from China that might have, say, lead paint in it, that is not as well constructed as a doll made in America that has a higher environmental and regulatory standard and that is made to a higher degree of quality. And those two products are both on Amazon, that yes, you probably would be willing to pay more for a better made American product, but here's the key point. With the tax cuts, the regulation cuts, the energy price decrease, and everything else that President Trump is doing to unleash this era of American prosperity and prevent the road we were on to get off that road of financial ruin and doom, means that it will be cheaper than ever to make and manufacture in America. I think that answers your question.
So I'm going to one more. Stephen, can I just... Can I ask about
Peter, we just gave you two questions. Brian, go ahead.
Last night,
Kamala Harris delivered her first major speech after losing the election. She attacked Trump personally, attacked the policies. Any comment from the White House on that?
Well, I think it was a great reminder to the American people of just how blessed we all are that the leader sitting in the Oval Office today is President Donald Trump and not President Kamala Harris. It was a helpful reminder of just what a travesty and a tragedy that would have been. It would have been the end of America. And it gives me a chance to bring this whole thing home. If we continued on this road of radical regulation, choking off American energy, sending our supply chains to foreign countries, taxing our economy to death, pushing this cancerous woke ideology on our children, ending merit, ending scientific innovation, ending public safety, allowing, everyone goes to the stores these days, everything's locked up, criminals roam free, law-abiding citizens under the previous administration were punished while gangbangers were given red carpet treatment. Democrats, of course, are still giving gangbangers red carpet treatment. And then the border invasion. If those policies had continued, it would have been the end of the American Republic. And the only thing Americans want to hear from Kamala Harris is an apology for joining Joe Biden, and remember, she was the border czar, joining Joe Biden in aiding and abetting the invasion of our country. And we're never going to stop talking about this because what they did to this country is unforgivable. It is an eternal stain on the Democrat Party. Every day we read another story. Every day we arrest another alien they let into this country who raped a child, who beat a woman within an inch of her life, who murdered a mom, who murdered a dad, who trafficked drugs into this country, who trafficked fentanyl into this country, who are responsible for dead and slaughtered Americans. And I don't know what's broken in the Washington press corps, that none of that moves them emotionally. The only thing that gets them exercised is, do we need to have more trials for terrorist supporters? We need to have more trials for gangbangers. We need to have more trials for illegal alien invaders, even though Congress and the Constitution clearly say that you can expel invaders and illegal aliens quickly, efficiently, and properly. This president has literally saved America, and I could not be prouder. I could not be prouder, as I know Caroline feels the same way, to come every single day to this building where we have a leader sitting in office whose first, last, and every thought is the safety, prosperity, security, and sovereignty of the citizens. That's an important word, people. Citizens of this republic. Thank you all.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you for your time. Thank you, everyone. And just to add on the Kamala Harris point, I think I speak for everyone at the White House. We encourage Kamala Harris to continue going out and do speaking engagements. You'll hear from the president at 11 o'clock. See you guys later.
A report the president's planning to fire Mike Waltz. You guys have a response?
Why haven't you nominated a single judge?
The only thing missing from that was Stephen Miller dropping the mic, literally, after all of the soliloquies and the eloquence from the White House podium this morning. You just saw it here on Real America's Voice. You won't see it on CNN, but you will see it here on Real TV, here on Real America's Voice. All right, let's bring in Terrance and Gina to discuss this briefly here. What do you guys think? I mean, to me, the dress down of the media over the Kilgar Abrego Garcia situation, I thought that stood out to me. And of course, the trying to explain what's going on with the economy also was important. But what did you think, Dr. G?
Yeah, well, you got to love the straight talk and the common sense. I mean, who holds a press briefing on common sense? I'm pretty sure that's never happened in the history of America. But leave it to Stephen Miller and Caroline Levitt to come up with this genius, because you know what? It speaks to Joe Sixpack. It speaks to the average American, David. This is plain talk that Americans have been asking for decades, and they're getting it. And I thought the whole thing was just it was pungent. It was direct. There's nothing fluffy here. And this is the kind of just real authenticity that I think people have been demanding, and they're finally getting. It's really nice to see, Terrance.
David, you used the word dress down, and that's the exact term I was thinking. It was a dress down. Miller stood there at the podium and dressed down the media. And having been part of the mainstream media for decades, and having covered these sorts of things, I can tell you right now, there's this sense of, how dare he? among many of the media in that room, there's a sense of how dare they say this to us? Why is he being so condescending? But the answer to that is because many in the media haven't been doing their job. Many of them haven't been covering common sense stories from a perspective of common sense and from the perspective of the average everyday American. And so that is why there's this face-off, if you will, right now between the Trump administration and between the media, the mainstream media right now. And they're angry. David, you know it. You've been in these sort of press briefing rooms. They're angry right now. They feel that what they just heard was condescending and they were called to the carpet.
Yeah.
Are they the mainstream media, though?
Well, true.
I mean, are they? Or is independent media the mainstream now? I mean, I'm just throwing that question out there. David, go ahead.
Well, let me answer that question, actually. And I think it's a little bit more complicated than we think. I mean, I think that the easy answer is they're not the mainstream media. You know, the American people, and what we're doing here is the mainstream media. But so that's like a full stop, right? Now, having said that, here's the problem. The liberal media still dominate the coverage. And what do I mean by that? Because the truth of the matter is, this White House cares. They do. They care what the New York Times and others are writing. I hate to say it, but it's true. And, and what I mean by that is that the reason they care, not because they respect the New York Times, that's not why they care, but they care because they know that the New York Times and the Washington Post and CNN and MSNBC, and you just go down the list, all of them together as an aggregate, as Mark Halperin used to call them, they're the gang of 500. And when you put them in aggregate, when you put them together, they continue to influence the narrative. Are we influencing the narrative? Absolutely. That's what's a big-time game changer. Don't get me wrong. But they are still around. They are still around. And so I think that's why you see President Trump talk with Kirsten Welker at Meet the Press. If they weren't irrelevant, he wouldn't. And Terry Moran at ABC, and Jeffrey Goldberg at The Atlantic. So we can't just say that they're a bunch of bozos, which they are, but we can't just say they're a bunch of bozos and just discount them. If this White House is going ahead and giving them interviews, we need to think through that, T. Bates. We need to think through why that's happening. And I don't think it's just a challenge that President Trump wants to have and have a little fun with them. I think that's part of it. But they do care what these outlets write, because these outlets still are carrying in aggregate some of the big headlines of the day. That's the truth.
And it's a numbers game. Because they still have larger audiences it's the numbers than most game. Other media. Exactly. It's a numbers game. Whether you want to acknowledge it or not, it's a numbers game. And so in my mind, that is to some degree what makes them mainstream. Whether what they're reporting is accurate, whether it is where the mainstream American stands, we can argue that. But from a numbers perspective, they've got it. They've got the audience. I just think that's a reality. Let's bring in Steve Gruber, guys, now. Steve, I'd love to get your perspective on this as well. Whether they're the mainstream media or not, I think it does come down to a numbers game. And the reality is the Trump administration is, to David's point, to some degree playing to them because they know they can get the best bang or the most bang for their buck, or at least some bang, if you will. I can't believe
there's no question about that. Look, they have bigger audiences than everybody else combined. That's a fact when you put them together. The aggregate, like you're talking about Terry Moran there at ABC News. Look, the interview is going to be hostile. He knows that going in. If he sits down with the New York Times or the Washington Post or ABC or whomever, he knows it's going to be hostile. If he sits down with Kristen Welker, the same thing. These people are, they're genetically opposed to Donald Trump. It's the way it is. They are genetically opposed to him. I don't know why, but they refuse to give him any sort of, a benefit of the doubt ever. And that's the way it's going to be. But in doing these interviews, Donald Trump is so used to it and so good at it. This is why he did so well in the debate against Joe Biden, because he is seasoned. He's tested. He knows that these questions are coming. He knows he's going to get curveballs and sideways questions, and that they're going to try to cut him off and set the narrative themselves. And I think that defines him pretty well, oftentimes, for the independents. For the people that don't like Donald Trump, they're never going to like Donald Trump. They're genetically incapable, doesn't matter. But for those people in the middle that are persuadable, and there is a group, obviously, because they voted for Donald Trump this time around. That persuadable middle, if you will, whatever percentage it is, 10 or 15 or 20 points, could be persuadable in 2026 and persuadable in 2028 if the economy is good. So you look at the big news outlets, and that's why Donald Trump is doing this. He's very good at it. He's a master at it, and he has to play to that crowd, just like you guys said, for the numbers, but it also brings that middle to him, I believe. He has more success there being in front of more people that might otherwise ignore him, and he gets to play to that audience. It's critical.
Yeah.
You've
So
stumped
what was
us
your
all,
takeaway
Steve.
from
We have no questions. Just kidding.
Go ahead, David. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say what you made of Stephen Miller's comments. Briefly. I mean, don't be Stephen Miller for us today, but give it to us in Reader's Digest version, Steve.
Well, look, some of the things he touched on. He's exactly right. Why does this mainstream media have this empathy, this sympathy for gangbangers? Why does the mainstream media seem to think that federal district judges are the law of the land? I mean, I use this example again, but can you imagine somebody walking into the Oval Office saying, Mr. President, I am sorry, but a federal district judge in Maryland has said your Emancipation Proclamation has been set aside. It does not apply. I mean, come on, guys. This is not the way it works. I'm sorry, Mr. President. The EPA that you put in by way of executive order, it's been classified as unconstitutional. I mean, look, federal district judges belong in their lane. The sympathy shown by the mainstream media to people that are known members of MS-13 or Tren de Aragua, it's, from most people, it's obscene. Why would these people, they don't want them as their neighbors, they want them as my neighbor and your neighbor. These people in the media, they live in their little fancy gated communities. They don't have to live next to these people. They don't live down in the city where the unemployment rate's 20%, and you've got gangbangers on the corner selling drugs and prostituting women. They don't have that next to them, but it's perfectly fine if you do. So just sit there and shut up. No, Stephen Miller's right, and it's an embarrassment and hypocrisy to the highest of what these people do.
Well, Steve, I'll tell you what, I couldn't agree with you more, which means I agree with you, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. And you're right. On these district judges, these federal district judges should be about process. Should not be about overturning something on a nationwide injunction. There's much difference. There's a big difference there.
Well,
so, Steve Gruber, great to have you. And go ahead. 10 seconds.
You.
Go ahead, though.
I was just going to say, how do you have a judge from Louisiana deciding whether or not Ivy League schools get funded? I'm sorry. Which Ivy League school is in Louisiana? Because I don't remember any being down there.
Right.
Well, you better preach, Steve. You better preach,
Thanks,
Steve Gruber. Yes.
Thanks, Steve. We got to go.
Thank you.
We're all going to Anchor Jail. Back in a moment, everybody.
Anchor Jail.
Let's spill some tea.
All right, we're going to spill some tea, sponsored by the Artillery Tea Company, artilleryteaco.com. Use promo code America's Tea for 25% off your first order. It's all natural, whole leaf. They're chemical free. They can be used twice. Artillery Tea Company, family, veteran owned and operated. Portion of your purchases, go to help veteran and first responder charities. Artilleryteaco.com. Promo code America's Tea. Take a breath, David, for 25% off your first order. All right, I just spoke to the third person. Time to spill some tea, guys. And in the cup today, how about this Rav and Just the News special coming up? Let's talk about it real quick. 6 p.m. tonight, Real America's Voice and Just the News is going to air a new special called the First Annual American Border Hero Awards. So we've got John Solomon talking with border czar Tom Holman about the changes that the Trump administration has made for border security. Dr. G, tell you what, that's going to be must-see TV.
100%. Super exciting. You know, I love the work that Rav has done on the border. Remember that we've been talking about this since before really any other media was really talking about this. We've had Ben Berquam and many others actually on the border reporting to us at Rav ever since I've been here. And my 7-year anniversary at Rav was about 4 days ago, I think. So it's been a long time. And there were nobody else had anybody down on the border at that point, at least not on a daily basis. So pretty proud of that, Terrance.
Yeah, and our coverage has been more in depth and more in your face than I think any other coverage you'll see out there on any sort of network. Ben Berquam, Oscar L. Blue Ramirez, they have been front and center, and so kudos to both of those. They get the T. Bates Award.
Sounds good. And Gina will send you a cake for that anniversary. Great show today. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Gotta go. War Room is next. Have a good one, everybody. See you tomorrow.
Can explain it, but I can tell you that right now we have over 100 countries that are calling us like morning, noon, and night, dying to make a deal. We're in a great position of strength. We'll make great deals. And where we don't make deals, Stephen, we're just going to set the deals. We'll say that country is going to pay a 20% tariff. That country is going to pay 15%. Another one's going to pay 30 or 40% because we have a big, deficit with a certain country. They're going to pay 30, 40, 50, 60%. So we'll just set those deals. I could set those deals tomorrow and do away with negotiating, but we're negotiating with South Korea, we're negotiating with Japan, we're negotiating with a lot of different, many, India is a very big, they want to make a deal so badly. Okay. I'm not telling anything out of school. We're going to make great deals for America instead of bad.
Well, policies. So what we're talking about, Steve, and why I needed you now, thank you for joining us, is Carville saying the tax cuts for the billionaires, the tax cuts for the top, that's what Trump's about, and that's killing us. You say, not this time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, when Biden and Schumer and Pelosi ran things in January, February, March, April of 2021, did we see a tax hike on the billionaires? You most certainly did not. It never even got a committee. Why? The Democratic Party is owned by billionaires. That's why you have a billionaire class, a credential class. James, they've abandoned what used to be Clinton's base. They abandoned the working class folks in this country. They abandoned Democratic families like mine. They abandoned it. And that's what President Trump is trying to reverse, is what really started with Bush 41 and Clinton. This globalization.
Show Jimmy, because Jimmy's going to respond.
It was Bill Clinton that allowed the Chinese Communist Party into the World Trade Organization. By the way, both parties did it, the neoliberal neocon, and that's why both parties are responsible for this. President Trump, this is a revolution. You're 100 days into this, and that's what he's trying to do, is redo the entire commercial relationships of the world that focus not just on America first, but American citizens first, and particularly working class and middle class, to bring high value added manufacturing jobs back.
So Steve says that he's going to raise taxes on the rich to help pay for the tax cuts for the middle class this time.
I hope that Steve is right. As you know, it was won at the Supreme Court, and